This is our MC, Jin Seowon, a 2-3-year-old lazy-ass gamer and manhwa freak, pretty much a certified nerd with zero ambition outside of virtual worlds. If there's a game to grind or a Muram novel to binge, he's all in. Real life doesn't stand a chance against his obsession. When he's gaming, he's an entirely different beast. Earlier, he'd been deep into a Muram novel when a plot twist hit him like a truck. A few months back, he wrapped up his military service, though it didn't exactly end on a high note. It was more of a train wreck, honestly. His one and only friend eventually called, practically begging him to hit up some games. Seowon didn't even think twice before saying yes. Gaming was always the obvious choice. Responsibility could wait. With just a few bucks to his name, he dragged his broke ass to the gaming station, half-heartedly considering the idea of a part-time job. He figured that was future Seowon's problem. Right now, he was all set to dive into loyal grounds for the next 10 hours. Seowon wasn't just any gamer. He was the type who spent hours lost in fantasies of being the ultimate Muram protagonist, while grinding his way to the top in loyal grounds. After 3 relentless months, he cracked the top 10, flexing his ultra-pro skills and making some decent cash from tournaments along the way. Grinding had definitely paid off. Now, let's take a quick look at the game. It kicks off with 100 players getting tossed out of a plane straight into the chaos below. Their job is find weapons as fast as humanly possible and take out anyone in their path until one final badass claims that winner winner chicken dinner. Sounds familiar, right? Thanks to our boy's quick reflexes and eagle-eyed vision, he spotted his opponent from 250 meters away, rocking a skull helmet, like he was about to start a biker gang. Without a second thought, Seowon started tearing through the lobby, dropping players left and right like it was just another Tuesday. 2 more kills later, it was down to 3 players, including himself and 2 unlucky souls. That's when his friend, who'd already been knocked out, started running his mouth over the mic, throwing out so-called pro tips like he was some gaming guru. Seowon couldn't care less and just told him to zip it. The last remaining duo decided to make a break for a random ruined house, probably thinking they'd struck gold when they found a first aid kit inside. Rookie mistake. Nothing's ever free in this world except advice, which usually sucks. Seowon knew they'd fallen for the bait, so he took the next step, opened fire. The first guy, still gloating over his free loot, dropped like a sack of potatoes. His teammate, realizing it was a trap, tried to make a run for it, but Jin's bullet found him before he got out the door. And just like that, Seowon snagged the first place of the game. After sinking countless hours into the game, Seowon finally decided to wrap it up. Maybe it was time to hit pause on gaming and actually study starting tomorrow, of course. But as the saying goes, there is no tomorrow. And for Seowon, that couldn't be more accurate. Just as he was about to log out, his phone buzzed, yanking his attention away from the screen. A message from his mom. Typical. As always, she'd sent over his academy fees, along with some extra cash for his well-being, reminding him to take care of himself. She even promised to send more next time. Typical mom stuff, always looking out for him, no matter how much of a mess he made of his life. Seowon let out a long sigh as he stepped out of the gaming station. Every time he saw a message from his mom, a familiar pang of guilt hit him. She kept supporting him like he was still that hard-working kid she once knew. Meanwhile, here he was wasting away in gaming stations and dodging responsibilities like a pro. It wasn't like he didn't want to do better. It was just easier not to. Night had settled in, but Seowon, the certified insomniac, was still glued to his phone. But instead of the usual high-quality stuff everyone watches at 2 a.m., he was watching some news clip about a bunch of weirdos calling themselves players. Curiosity got the better of him, and he decided to dig deeper. But just as he tried to find more, the page straight up vanished. Even the video he'd watched a millisecond ago had mysteriously poofed into thin air, like it never existed. Seowon frowned, wondering if his sleep-deprived brain was playing tricks on him. After a moment of contemplation, he just shrugged it off. Whatever. Not like he had the energy to bother. He tossed his phone aside, muttering about how weird it was, and tried to get some sleep. The next day, Seowon made his way to the academy, still glued to his phone screen like always. He barely looked up, too caught up in the upcoming clan war in-game. But then, out of nowhere, a sudden flash of light practically slapped him in the face. Before his brain could even process what the hell was happening, the light completely swallowed him up. 1 second, he was standing there like a zombie. The next, he was gone, just like that. Yep, Light-kun straight up kidnapped him. When Seowon woke up, he found himself sprawled out on a random field, and the scene in front of him was pure chaos. 2 guys were going at each other with swords, swinging like they had a personal vendetta. The language they were shouting at each other was complete gibberish, totally foreign. Seowon couldn't make out a single word. He glanced around and spotted some other guys nearby, and his first thought was that they looked like full-on cosplayers. One dude in particular had this flashy mage getup and was pulling off some legit magic moves. Seowon was absolutely freaked out, still trying to process whether this was some kind of elaborate dream or if he'd just hit his head a bit too hard. As he scanned the area, his gaze landed on a massive statue right in front of him. Suddenly, a voice echoed in his head, cold and robotic, telling the language synchronization process is initiated. The words felt like they were sinking straight into his brain, and the next thing he knew, he could actually understand the shouting around him. Apparently, the 2 swordsmen had been fighting over some sect drama classic ego clash. Meanwhile, The mage, Blondie, pissed off, and looking ready to set someone on fire, was going off about being betrayed. Turns out, his opponent had tricked him multiple times before, and the guy honestly looked like a budget version of the Joker from The Dark Knight. The mage clearly wasn't in the mood for another heart-to-heart with his ex-bestie, so he whipped out one of his flashy attack spells. Only, when it hit, it didn't even leave a scratch. Seo-woon couldn't help but snicker a bit, realizing he was basically watching two idiots bicker in the middle of a battlefield. A sudden system notification blared, signaling the start of the game. The difficulty level was set to easy, at least on paper. To clear the stage, players just needed to make it into the top 90. Simple enough, right? Except there was no tutorial. The system wasn't about to hold anyone's hand. The map of the kingdom popped up, accompanied by an explanation from the knight statue, a familiar figure from the panels. The game was set to span 100 years in in-game time. Each day, the playable area on the map would shrink just a little, forcing players closer together. Trying to leave the designated zone wasn't an option. The consequences would be anything but pleasant. The game wouldn't end until only one player remained. Whoever managed to survive to the end and eliminate the final opponent would be returned to their original world. However, anyone who failed to make it into the top 90 would lose their chance to participate in Cloyd survival ever again. Alright, enough with the explanation. Let's cut to Seo-woon, who's currently dealing with the massive headache of realizing he might actually be in loyal grounds right now. Surrounded by barbaric brutes and shady-looking types, one thing's pretty damn clear: he's officially ducked hard to death. Just as he's spiraling into that lovely realization, a booming voice snaps him out of it. The source? An XL-sized gorilla of a guy, built like a brick wall with about a millimeter of brain power. To top it off, his ego is as fragile as a cheap vase. The dude looks ready to snap just because Seo-woon didn't immediately acknowledge his existence. Predictably, Gorilla Guy tries to take a swing, but the system's got other plans. Attack restrictions kick in, and the countdown starts. Seo-woon can't help but chuckle at the situation. Right before he's teleported out, he flashes the big guy a not-so-polite farewell gesture. 10 years of gaming experience have taught him one thing: always piss off the meatheads before making a clean escape. Day 1 of the Cloyd survival kicked off just as planned. Plane-kun did its thing, shoving players out one by one. The usual chaos unfolded, and among the crowd, 3 guys were already trailing behind a woman for, let's just say, 2 big obvious reasons. But Seo-woon wasn't about to join that sad parade. Unlike the others, he knew the hot drop areas had better loot, but he wasn't keen on diving straight into a death trap. Instead, he planned to start from the outskirts, less competition, more chances to gear up. After what felt like a century of looking for a decent landing spot, he finally picked one. The landing itself looked pretty badass, but there was just one problem: motion sickness. Seo-woon's stomach twisted, and he knew throwing up was a real possibility. Still, his priority was to find cover. As soon as his feet hit the ground, he bolted for the nearest house. That's when he heard it, a faint rustling sound. His heart raced, and he practically leapt inside, slamming the door behind him. First things first, weapon. He locked the door, exhaled sharply, and leaned against it. Reality hit him like a truck when he remembered the big and fragile guy he'd pissed off earlier. A pang of regret washed over him. Maybe provoking that dude wasn't the brightest move. He glanced out the window, expecting trouble, but after a moment, he realized the whole panic episode had been triggered by the rattling of the wind. Great. All that huffing and puffing for nothing. Shaking off the embarrassment, Seo-woon decided to start scavenging. Luck was on his side, a heavy crossbow tucked away in the corner. Not exactly his weapon of choice, but it was better than being defenseless. He hefted it, grimacing at the weight. Definitely heavier than expected, but no way was he ditching it. Testing it out seemed like the next logical step. The steps to load the bow and handle the crossbow flowed into Seo-woon's mind like second nature. Years of military training had drilled the basics into him, so aiming and shooting felt almost instinctual. With practiced ease, he pulled the trigger, and the arrow shot out with devastating speed. The recoil, though, was no joke. It launched him back several meters, completely catching him off guard. He hadn't expected the weapon to pack that much power. Still rubbing his shoulder from the impact, Seo-woon couldn't help but think that mastering this crossbow would be worth the effort. Once he got the hang of it, this thing could turn out to be seriously useful. With that thought settled, he decided to check out the area. The map was huge, a definite advantage, but he wasn't about to risk running into an enemy before snagging some decent loot. He slipped inside one of the nearby houses, scanning for anything useful. That's when his eyes landed on a strange scroll, faintly glowing on a dusty table. Curious, he picked it up, and a system message popped up. Healing scroll. Apparently, to acquire the skill, he'd have to rip it open. Not bad. A little healing on the side could definitely come in handy. And to top it all off, Seo-woon's gaze landed on a particular glowing book on the shelf. Something about it just screamed, "Pick me." As he got closer, he realized it contained a high-level martial art technique, Black Star Chi Palms. Apparently, mastering it would make weapon handling a breeze. Intrigued, Seo-woon couldn't help but wonder if a tutorial would kick in if he tried to learn it. Before he could even think of opening it, the book suddenly started glowing even brighter, its pages flipping on their own like it was possessed. Seo-woon just stood there, eyes wide, watching the spectacle. A few minutes later, the book started tearing itself apart, pages shredding into nothing. He couldn't help but blurt out, "What the fuck just happened?" Suddenly, He felt something strange in his palm, like a surge of power. Curiosity got the best of him. He grabbed a spoon from nearby and threw it with every bit of strength he could muster. The spoon shot forward like a bullet, smashing straight into the wall and leaving a noticeable crack. Seo-woon just stood there, dumbfounded. Realization hit him like a truck. He had actually learned martial arts. While yanking the fork out of the wall, he's thinking there's gotta be magic books too. I mean, if there are martial arts books, why not magic ones? Either way, he's dead sure this game, Cloyd, survival, and loyal ground are basically the same beast. He searches every damn corner for the item, but when nothing turns up, he figures it's time to bounce. Day flips to night while he's still on the hunt for a new spot. Finally, he spots a house with a light still on. Instant red flag. Could be a rare hidden item or another player. Either way, he gets that gut twist of fear. Slowly, he creeps inside, trying not to make a single sound. Dude still has no clue if whoever's inside is cracked at the game or just some noob. Hunkered by the stairs, he strains his ears nothing. Makes him think the player's camping upstairs, so he starts plotting an ambush, loading up his weapon and prepping those black star chi palms. Even if they're good, he might just stand a chance. Step by step, he creeps up with his crossbow aimed dead ahead, only to find just a damn lantern. No players. Could still be a trap though, so he boots a nearby door open like a badass empty. That's when it hits him. He's been spooking himself for nothing. Drops to the floor feeling dumb as hell, but also a little relieved nobody's here. While scavenging, jackpot, he finds a glowing ring that boosts strength by +20. He slips it on, and bam, body feels like it just got a full upgrade. Crossbow's light as a toy now. If strength can go up, there's gotta be other stats too. He pops open the stat window and, damn, his numbers are trash. Notices he's got the martial arts class, probably from that book earlier. Still, it's way better than when he first dropped in. He keeps searching and scores big again, a subspace ring. Perfect. Lets him stash gear in a pocket dimension. Touch the ring, think subspace, and boom, stuff's stored. Touch it again while thinking of the item, and it pops out. Feels weird at first, but hey, no more lugging a bag around. He dumps all his loot into it, then checks the survivor count, still 99 players left. He wanted to grind till it hit 90, but with his current loadout, he's feeling good. Even though it makes sense to wait till morning, he decides to prowl at night. Less foot traffic, more loot. Just one more farming spot before sunrise. Moving through the forest, he notices he's not tired, but hunger and thirst still hit. Makes him wonder if there's food in the city. Map says it should be just outside the forest, but no houses in sight. Then low, nasty growl behind him. Doesn't even turn around, just bolts. Finds a place to duck into and peeks back. Holy hell, a freaking werewolf. It swipes at him, claws whistling past as he dodges and sprints. Turns out, this game's got more than just sweaty players. There are monsters too. Heart pounding, he dives into the nearest house, trying to think fast. The werewolves track him by scent, so he knows hiding won't last. Time to flip the script. He lines up his shot and drops one with a clean headshot dead on impact. The second one roars and charges, smashing the door and nicking his face. Nowhere left to run. He fires again, but this one's quicker, blocking with its claws before lunging at him. The thing's practically in his face. He's thinking this might be it. Then instinct kicks in. He rips a dagger from his subspace and hurls it with a martial arts technique. The strike punches a damn hole through the werewolf. Even with the beast down, his hands are still shaking. One wrong move, and he'd have been dog food. He slumps to the ground, grateful as hell that he stashed that dagger, otherwise he'd have been toast to some random monster in the game. A glowing bag on the ground yanks Seo-woon out of his thoughts, and he figures it's probably loot dropped from some monster. Turns out it's just water and jerky, but that's enough to make him realize hell yeah, he can straight up hunt monsters for food. He munches while scouting the house for more goodies, and stumbles across some armor that looks like a bootleg bulletproof vest. The second he puts it on, it auto-sizes to fit him and boosts his resistance against fire and wind magic. His whole build just got way more cracked, so he keeps digging for loot. Right when he's about to call it quits, he kicks a random cloth bundle underfoot. Hidden inside is a night cloak that turns him invisible in the dark, as long as he doesn't move. Perfect for creeping around at night without getting spotted. At first, this house felt sus, but damn, it's actually a decent farming spot. Stepping outside, he realizes he hasn't run into a single player yet. Maybe it's because of where he landed, but then, just like fate, he hears heavy footsteps. Some poor bastard stumbles out, bleeding and muttering about not having time to use an item. Seo-woon stays tucked in the trees, shadowing his every step. He debates killing the guy, but his hands won't stop shaking. He's never actually killed a player before. Before he can decide, a mage pops out of nowhere and blasts the dude with a flame spell, roasting him alive. Seo-woon just stares, watching someone get burned to ash right in front of him, leaves him speechless. All that's left is a chest of loot. He tries to remind himself it's just a damn game, but it still messes with his head. The mage casually walks past him, muttering about how the guy tried to steal his items, completely ignoring Seo-woon's presence. While the mage scoops up everything, Seo-woon realizes the dead guy was just like him, a player trying to survive, and if he hesitates now, he'll be the next one roasted. He fires an arrow at the mage, but it bounces off a glowing shield. His stomach twists. The sound might drag other players here. He curses the mage for being so damn loud, then looses another arrow, chipping the shield even more. The mage panics. He knows if the shield breaks, he's screwed. He flings random flame spells, trying to scare Siawun off, but they don't do shit. Another arrow rips through, shattering the barrier. The mage starts fumbling to cast again, but before he can finish, a dagger slams straight into his skull. Instant kill. Siawun finally steps out of hiding, heart pounding, realizing he just won. He knows he can't stick around. The fire already lit up a beacon for anyone nearby. He strips both bodies, finding a gold necklace and a strange circular stone. The stone lets players use magic, and he remembers the dying guy whining about not having time to use his item. Smirking, he says he'll make good use of it in his name. Since it's way too risky to test loot here, he finds a hiding spot. When he finally activates the stone, the system warns him he can't move for 3 damn hours. He stays locked in place the whole time, gritting through the pain. But when it's over, the payoff is insane. He now has mage class stacked right next to his martial arts class, which means magic plus martial arts. Straight busted. Thinking about the 2 who died yesterday, he checks the survivor list. His jaw drops. The count has dropped by half. Only 45 players left. Word is, some psycho named Nam Sagwang is shredding everyone. Dude's literally smurfing in ancient Fortnite. The scene flips back to 3 hours earlier, where Sagwang is out there being a total bully, tormenting another player. The poor bastard begs for his life, saying he just wants to make it to the top 10, but Sagwang isn't the type to hand out charity kills. He just farms aura, ignores all the loot, and low-key wonders if the whole lobby already knows his name by now. Cut to day 3 of the survival game. Siawun wakes up and sees the survivor count drop to 45. The scoreboard is basically Sagwang spammed all over, so our boy knows exactly who to avoid. Still, he realizes that if people keep dropping like flies, he might actually crawl his way into the top 10. Before the game began, the system promised that top 10 rankers would get some kind of reward, and now he can't help but wonder what that prize is. While he's deep in thought, he suddenly remembers there's a killer running loose, so he better wrap up his search and move. Thanks to using the magic circle earlier, he feels this power inside him, pretty sure it's mana. To test it, he whips out the magic book he grabbed yesterday and instantly downloads a spell straight into his head. He chants, and 4 glowing magic balls float in the air. At first, it feels weak as hell, so he just yeets them away. But the moment they smash into the wall, boom, massive explosion, wall obliterated. Turns out this spell slaps after all. Then reality hits, his body crashes hard, drained because his mana's gone. Meanwhile, the map keeps shrinking, and he's sticking to the edges to dodge fights. Half the lobby's already toast anyway, so the odds of bumping into someone are slim. Still, he knows he needs to grind quick before the circle screws him over. As he moves to his next spot, an old man perched on a tree watches him like a hawk, finding his moves entertaining. Hours later, Siawun reaches a farming area and spots a pile of looted chests. Immediately sus, he whips around and blasts the entrance with his windball spell. The explosion wrecks the doorway, but no one's there. Just as he chills, he notices blood smeared on the wall inside. That screams injured player, and if they've lived this long, they're definitely strong. He decides not to risk it and bails. Good call, because inside is an injured survivor, watching him leave. The guy thinks he could have killed Siawun if he wasn't busted up, but before he can even loot a chest, an arrow drills through his skull, turning him into loot himself. Siawun just pulled a slick bait and kill. As he preps to leave, the old man suddenly appears behind him and says he looks pretty skilled. Siawun nearly shits himself, but the old dude calms him down, saying he just wants to ask some questions. Still rattled, Siawun asks who the hell he is, but instead of answering, the old man flips it, saying even if he told him, it wouldn't matter since they're all from different lives. His tone is weirdly soothing, making Siawun feel like this guy is built different from the other psychos in the game. The old man asks if Siawun has played this game before, revealing he's been stalking him for a while and noticed how quickly he adapted. Siawun's shocked he never noticed the tale and says it's his first run here, though he's played a game similar to this in his own world. The old man is curious, but with night closing in, they need to move somewhere safe. He asks Siawun if the moon in his world is as massive as this one. Siawun looks up and realizes he never noticed before the moon here is huge, way bigger than the one back home. The old man confirms it's the same for him too. He drags the convo back to the game, asking Siawun to explain more. Our boy says standing around is just asking for an ambush. The old man agrees and suggests they head out. Still, Siawun is nervous about being stabbed in the back, so he asks for some reassurance. The old guy tells him he already knows he won't kill him, then suddenly grabs him and blitzes across the forest at insane speed, stopping high up on a tree. From there, Siawun starts explaining everything about his own game world. The old man listens, intrigued, saying his world sounds magical. Siawun, struggling to keep his balance, corrects him it's a world of super advanced civilization. The old man says that must be why he adapts so damn fast here. He also reveals he's been watching since Siawun first dropped. His plan was just to vibe in the mountains the whole game, but Siawun's playstyle caught his attention. Finally, The old man assures him he only started this conversation out of curiosity to figure out why they were dragged here and swears he means no harm. Seo-woon admitted he had no damn clue why they were dragged into this nightmare. Back in his world, the game was just for fun. No one actually died, but here, it was a whole different beast. The motives of those supernatural bastards who yanked them out of their worlds were a total mystery. After a pause, he said he was pretty sure there had to be some kind of reward waiting at the end. The old man raised a brow, and Seo-woon explained that in the game, when players die, they don't really die, they just get sent back to their original worlds with some rank slapped on them based on performance. The rewards probably included all the loot they managed to collect. The old man asked if he meant the items on his body. Seo-woon went further, saying maybe they could even keep the martial arts techniques they picked up here. For some, that could be life-changing. The old man didn't like that, asking why he assumed his own life wasn't full of struggles. Seo-woon told him straight he looked like some legendary martial arts master with armies of followers in his world, while back home, Seo-woon was basically nothing. That made the old man laugh and ask why he kept hovering his fingers in the air. As night faded into day, Seo-woon kept breaking down all the rules and hacks of the game for him. Eventually, the old man dropped him off somewhere safe, apologizing for taking up too much of his time. Before leaving, he asked if Seo-woon wanted anything in return. Without a second's hesitation, Seo-woon asked to learn his martial arts techniques. The old man's face turned serious, said it wasn't impossible, but he better be ready for the worst. And by worst, he meant death. To truly get power outside the normal way, the price was steep. After his dramatic little speech, Seo-woon reminded him no one actually dies in this game. That snapped the old man back to reality, and he admitted it might be doable. Seo-woon pressed him about getting stronger fast, and the old man said it was worth a shot. First, they needed to check his energy. Placing his palm on Seo-woon's head, the old man nearly jumped back in shock. His inner energy was weaker than his damn house dogs. In Seo-woon's defense, he came from a world with zero magic or martial arts, so what did they expect? The old man told him to sit in lotus position and began the process. He warned the kid the pain would feel like death and he wouldn't be able to move, but if he failed to endure it, he'd be done for. As the energy transfer started, Seo-woon felt everything. Every sound, every breath, even his heartbeat was booming in his skull. His lungs burned like molten lava. The pain was brutal. So intense he thought his body might actually give out. Finally, he opened his eyes, trembling like hell. The old man pulled back his hand, telling him it was over. He was impressed the kid managed to survive it. His body wasn't bad after all. His chi flow was fixed now, and his body would be different. Seo-woon had no clue what that even meant, so he asked what came next. The old guy reminded him he wanted quick strength, and explained he had just pushed his soul aside a little, carving out an inspirational gate in that space. Normally, people absorb chi through breathing, but thanks to that empty slot in his soul, Seo-woon could take in energy in other ways too. He explained that people are made up of three things: body, mind, and soul, all tied together by life, chi. When someone dies, their chi doesn't vanish. It spreads into nature, keeping the cycle alive. But there are sick bastards who think that's a waste. They kill others to steal their chi. Problem is, it doesn't always work, and most of them either lose their martial arts or die a pathetic death. The mind technique he just tattooed into Seo-woon's body would let him absorb life chi from the dead to boost his energy. Seo-woon got nervous and asked if this meant he was also going to die. The old man explained it was different for him. His soul had been tweaked to let chi flow in, and since he didn't have any inner energy to begin with, he was basically a blank canvas. That made it possible for him to absorb life ki smoothly. Plus, since they were inside the game, he could abuse this forbidden technique without consequence. Nobody really dies here. They just respawn back in their worlds. If he wanted to survive, he needed to take out the other players and suck up their energy. If he did, he'd hit some insane level of power by the end of the 100 days. After dropping that insane bomb of knowledge, the old man said his farewell and started to leave. Seo-woon quickly stopped him, asking for his name. The old man gave a knowing look, saying he was Jang Do-chin, but people called him the Deep Valley Standing Kindly. The technique he taught was called the White Martial Physique Arts. Before disappearing faster than the wind, he advised Seo-woon to focus on his breathing. It would stack up inner energy and make him stronger. Finally, they parted ways. Seo-woon stood there, thinking that if he could master this forbidden technique, he might someday move with the same blinding speed as that old monster. But for now, he needed to head toward the edge of the map. Seo-woon got yeeted straight into the center of the map in a blink, but the walk back hit different. The place was massive as hell, and by the time he finally reached some houses, the sun had dipped, and night was crawling in. One house had a lantern glowing, sketchy as hell, so he crept in with his crossbow locked and loaded. Turned out it was empty, no jump scare, just dust. He started farming, but luck wasn't on his side, finding nothing but trash tier loot. Exhausted, he just crashed for the night. Morning hit, with the sound of someone sneaking around. Instantly awake, he grabbed his crossbow, camping at the door like a wolf waiting to pounce. The second the door creaked open, he let an arrow fly dead center at the guy's skull. But the player wasn't a noob. Dude was a martial artist and sliced the arrow clean in half. Seo-woon didn't flinch. He snapped back with his black star chi palm, sending out a flurry of daggers that tore through the guy's guard and smashed him to the ground. With one solid kick, he knocked the sword out of his hand and aimed the arrow at his face. The man knew it was GG, begged for his life, promised to drop everything he had. Didn't matter, Siawoon ended him right there, reminding himself he had to survive too. Then, something wild, he noticed a green glow around the chest the dude dropped. Looked like it was radiating life chi. He raised his hand, started absorbing that energy, and boom, his whole body felt lighter, sharper, stronger. Just one kill, and he was buzzing like he'd unlocked cheat codes. Checking his stats, he saw a new category, inner energy. 20 points already. It hyped him up, but he knew spamming kills alone wouldn't cut it. He'd need other ways to power up. While he was soaking in his new boost, the player count had already plummeted to 24, and it was only day 5. Then a name popped up on the kill feed, Nam Sagwang. That psycho was a walking nuke, wiping players like it was target practice. With blood dripping down his face, Sagwang scrolled the feed and noticed Seawoon's name too, getting mildly pissed since he'd seen it earlier as well. Meanwhile, Seawoon was dead set on one thing: avoid Sagwang at all costs. Right now, he could barely handle average scrubs. Facing that beast would be suicide. Digging through the chest, the best thing he found was a troll's potion. Nothing game-breaking, so he decided to lay low, hide, and outlast the chaos until the numbers dropped. Fast forward a week. He was farming for food and thinking how lucky he'd been early on not running into anyone. Problem was, the only thing to eat was jerky, and he was getting sick of that salty crap. With just 20 players left, he stayed hugging the map's edge. Sticking his hand outside the barrier even for a second felt like his flesh was on fire. Proof that falling behind meant instant death. All week, the kill log was basically one name on repeat: Nam Sagwang. Then Seawoon spotted smoke in the distance. Something big was going down. Turns out, it was Sagwang, surrounded by a squad of players teaming up to take him down. But instead of sweating, Sagwang laughed, thanking them for saving him the trouble of hunting. His face twisted into something monstrous as he asked if they were ready to die the same way they wanted to kill him. And then all hell broke loose. Sagwang leapt high, grabbed the first guy by the face, and crushed his skull like a soda can. In the same breath, he punched another dude's head clean off. 2 kills in 1 second. The others froze, watching a nightmare come alive. Sagwang didn't stop. He tore through them like they were paper dolls, counting each kill as if it was a damn sport. By the end, the kill feed lit up with his name over and over again. 9 bodies in 1 massacre. Seawoon was trembling, realizing the guy had just soloed 9 players without breaking a sweat. Sagwang, drenched in gore, looked disgusted by the blood sticking to his skin, and walked off to wash it away. That night, the elven mage from the start of the game came across the wreckage. Spotting a staff, he recognized it belonged to a girl he knew. Quietly, he swore to avenge her. At the same time, our MC is crouched in the bushes, playing it sneaky while waiting for more players to drop off. He's already close to top 10, but he knows surviving this far without good loot is basically suicide. While sneaking around, he stumbles across this massive-ass mansion sitting right on the edge of the zone. The moment he steps inside, he's low-key stunned. Place looks like some royal palace dropped into the middle of the game. He digs around and finds a guard's armor, but his stats are too low to rock it, so it's straight up useless trash for him. Moving along, he comes across an elixir with a 3-hour timer that boosts internal energy. That one actually makes him stop and think he's realizing he can level up his inner power without sucking up life chi. That's pretty damn wild. As he keeps searching, he finds a martial arts book and even a hidden cellar. But right before he can head inside, boom, a massive explosion goes off, blowing the whole place to hell. He shakes off the dust and spots a mage standing there, and this bastard isn't alone. The blast was meant for Nam Sagwang, who somehow tanked it and is still standing. Sagwang tells the mage to cut the talking and throw hands instead. The mage grins like a psycho and steps up, ready for the fight. Our MC stays tucked in the bushes, wide-eyed, realizing that the monster who wiped out most of the game is just some kid. The fight kicks off, and the mage pops off with his escrow-style lightning strikes. Sagwang's just too damn fast and slips past them, pissing the mage off. The guy's screaming for Sagwang to face him head-on, like he did with that girl earlier. Sagwang, starting to see how cracked this mage really is, gets serious. He tanks multiple bolts of lightning and still dodges through before leaping in for the kill. But the mage is insane. He swings his staff hard enough to split Sagwang in half. To his shock, the body he ripped apart was just a clone. The real Sagwang is still somewhere on the ground, keeping low. Our boy Seawoon is watching all this madness, even wondering if the rain he feels is just from the mage's non-stop spells. Meanwhile, the mage starts losing it. Sagwang has completely vanished, no presence detected. He rages and swears he'll hunt him down no matter what. A little distance away, Sagwang is actually limping through the trees, body beat to hell but still alive. He smiles bitterly, knowing the mage technically won this round, but he's not letting him get away next time. For now, he needs to play safe and heal up. Back at the mansion's wreck, the mage finally bails after confirming Sagwang's nowhere in sight. Thanks to his cloak of hiding, Seawoon survives the chaos untouched. Once things calm down, he sneaks out and finds his lamp. Somehow, the basement entrance is still intact, so he slips in. Turns out, it's just a food shop, no loot whatsoever. Still, his stomach's growling, so he scarfs down whatever's there until he's full. About an hour later, he debates whether to down the elixir since he's got time. He also remembers the martial arts manual. The description says it was created by a dude who poured his whole life and soul into it. But here's the kicker, he never won a single damn match with it, and died pathetically without a single disciple. That makes Seo-woon doubt for a second, but in the end, he figures shit's better than nothing. He decides to gulp the elixir first, bracing for the usual painful process. This time though, it hits different. His whole body feels flooded with raw energy, then it overheats and leaves him drained, too tired to even move. When it's finally done, he just crashes, dead tired, but grateful he hasn't bumped into more players and somehow survived a battle between a psycho mage and Nam Sagwang. He wakes up the next day, checks the player count, and notices the old man is gone, apparently offed himself. Since he knew the guy, he figures the geezer must have tried some absurd training method, since there's literally no real risk in this game. The map keeps shrinking, so he knows it's time to move again. He's made it this far by sticking to his sneaky-ass strategy, and it's perfect for someone like him who honestly doesn't have any real combat skills. Moving through the forest, he suddenly gets blasted by a massive explosion, barely dodging it by a hair. The raw power alone gave away who was behind it. Up ahead stood the Archmage, looking pissed off, convinced he'd sensed Sagwang nearby. He barked that if the kid didn't give up Sagwang's location, he'd kill him right there. All the while, Nam Sagwang had been lurking right behind him, grinning like a smug bastard as he listened. The mage's eyes locked coldly on Seo-woon, demanding Sagwang's whereabouts, threatening that if he didn't spill, he was as good as dead. To the mage, anyone without answers was nothing but trash. Shocked and pissed, Seo-woon fired back in frustration. Meeting this guy for the first time and already being treated like dirt was insane. He tried to explain he had no damn clue where Sagwang was hiding. Then, his expression stiffened, something caught his eye. His stomach dropped as Sagwang came crashing down from above, wrapped in blinding energy. The mage, still unaware, kept rambling, saying he only asked because Seo-woon looked like he was from the same region as Sagwang. If he wasn't, then he could just die. Suddenly, Sagwang slammed into the mage like a thunderbolt, sparks crackling all around. The mage flinched, too slow to react, realizing he'd been played. With a cocky grin, Sagwang announced he was fully recovered and mocked the mage for running low on mana. Seo-woon just stood there, stunned, as the kid powered up his fist with explosive energy and roared that he was ending it. The punch landed with brutal force, launching the mage backward in a blast of blue light. Bruised but holding on, the mage muttered that a basic attack like that couldn't hurt him, but then pain tore through his body, blood spraying as his expression twisted in horror. Sagwang sneered, hand glowing with lethal power, asking if the mage had ever heard of enhanced energy. His hand pulsed as he explained that arm energy was a rare martial art, known only to a few masters. He hadn't expected to use it here, but now the mage could feel honored for being the first. The mage wheezed, gasping for air. In a split second, Sagwang's electrified fist tore straight through his body, blood exploding everywhere as the mage screamed. Towering over the broken figure, Sagwang mocked him, asking if he had any more of those annoying spells left. He even admitted the guy could have made the top 5 if only fate hadn't thrown them together. From the sidelines, Seo-woon watched with wide eyes, stunned. He felt lucky Sagwang had shown up, but deep down, he knew this chaos was his one chance to get away. While the two clashed, he bolted. Behind him, Sagwang unleashed another savage punch, telling the mage to just die already. The ground quaked as the blast hit, blood spraying from the mage's wrecked body. Too weak to resist, the archmage got his chest pierced once again by Sagwang's sparking fist. Seo-woon froze, shaken to the core, watching the so-called mighty archmage crumble like trash. For the first time, he started to wonder how powerful he could become if he absorbed that kind of life energy. Sagwang stood over the mage, taunting him, calling his body nothing more than a half-dead corpse. He asked if there were any last words, then laughed cruelly, reminding him he couldn't even speak anymore. The mage glared back in silence, his bloody face twisted in agony. Then Sagwang heard a voice in his head, the mage speaking through telepathy. He revealed that Elizabeth, the person Sagwang killed, was his most cherished disciple. Sagwang paused, thrown off by the voice. The mage went on, explaining that Elizabeth had been kicked out of university just for being a girl. He regretted failing to protect her. Sagwang sneered, claiming that if she was really a girl, he would have noticed unless she looked too much like a man. That filthy line made the mage's face contort with rage. With a dark grin, he swore silently that he'd shut Sagwang's foul mouth for good. Sagwang's cocky smile dropped, his eyes narrowing as he demanded what the mage just said. At that same instant, Seo-woon spotted something in the sky. Everyone turned, stunned, as the mage summoned a giant meteor barreling down. Sagwang's eyes went wide, fury spilling out as he cursed at the sight, unable to grasp how the guy was still casting spells. The mage's voice echoed in his head one last time. This was his final spell, fueled by both mana and life force. Its name was Armageddon. As the meteor plummeted, the mage whispered softly to Elizabeth, saying he was ready to see her again. In a flash of red energy, he vanished, leaving behind only a chest. Then the meteor struck, shaking the earth with apocalyptic force, flattening everything in its path. Far away, An elven archer stood watching silently. The sight of that destructive magic was all the proof he needed of exactly who had cast it. Back on the ground, Seowon was wrecked, cursing himself for not running sooner. He scrambled for a healing elixir and a scroll, chugged one, activated the other, desperate as hell. The pain was still clawing at him, but he wasn't about to roll over and die. He burned through more scrolls, dumping every last resource he had. Barely clinging to life, he stood in the middle of the torn-up dirt and shredded paper, chest heaving, muttering that he could finally breathe for a bit. But then he checked his system log and something felt off. The kill record showed Nam Sagwang took down the mage, but Sagwang's death wasn't logged anywhere. A cold shiver ran down his spine as the thought hit him that the kid might still be alive. Then came a faint cry for help. Seowon followed the voice into the forest and found Sagwang barely hanging on, clutching a healing scroll in his teeth like some desperate dog. Sagwang begged him to help, since his arms were useless. Calm as stone, Seowon confirmed his identity, and the kid recognized him instantly. Sagwang admitted he always thought he'd win, that he was curious what kind of loot Seowon must have had. He promised that if Seowon helped him just this once, he'd hand over victory. But Seowon had other plans. As he pulled out a glowing purple sword, the intent was clear. If he absorbed Sagwang's strength and items, he'd secure his win for sure. Sagwang panicked, begging, spitting out warnings about stronger enemies still lurking, whining that he didn't even have good gear. But Seowon stayed cold, raised his blade, introduced himself as Jin Seowon, and got ready to strike. Sagwang screamed that even if he died now, he'd never forget this betrayal. His eyes lit up with pure hatred as he shrieked Seowon's name right before the sword slammed down. Blood sprayed violently as the blade skewered his skull. Seowon didn't even flinch. He caught his breath afterward, staring at the corpse. Watching the top dog of the game die like a helpless kid left him with a flicker of guilt. But then something wild happened. A surge of blue energy bled out of Sagwang's body and wrapped around him. The rush of power was insane, far beyond what he'd imagined. Seowon grinned, half in disbelief. Sagwang had basically turned into a walking elixir. The energy flooded him, overflowing through every inch of his body. Elsewhere, players checked the kill log and saw that Nam Sagwang was officially gone. An elven archer perched in a tree muttered that with the lion dead, the foxes would now run wild. Meanwhile, Seowon stood there glowing, staring at his hands, feeling the massive wave of inner energy pulsing inside. He thought he could crush anyone now. His eyes shifted to the glowing loot box Sagwang had left behind. As he reached for it, he wondered just how strong Sagwang had been before the game even started. There was no way someone like that avoided farming. He hoped the box wasn't empty, because that would be some bullshit. The moment he opened it, a burst of bright green light blinded him. Inside floated 5 rings, each one radiating raw power, one boosting agility, another amping strength, one cranking stamina, and 2 stacked with magic resistance. The rings hovered in the air as he stared in shock. Sliding them on, he scoffed at Sagwang for fronting like he didn't rely on gear while secretly hoarding god-tier items. The second the rings fused to him, the energy around his body spiked even harder. Opening his stats window, he almost laughed at how much his numbers skyrocketed. He clenched his fists, smirking, and muttered that he could win now for sure. Digging further through the loot, he found martial arts manuals glowing with purple energy, but they all needed advanced cultivation methods he hadn't learned yet, so they were useless for now. Moving deeper into the forest, he suddenly froze, sensing a presence. Out of nowhere, a massive wave of fire blasted him, the kind of attack only an archmage could pull off. Seowon tanked the whole thing and walked through the smoke. On the other side stood a low-level mage, mocking him for not noticing. The bastard bragged that if Seowon killed Nam Sagwang, it must have been pure dumb luck. But Seowon stepped forward unharmed, calm as hell, asking what the mage thought he was even doing. The guy's face dropped, realizing his attack hadn't even left a scratch. Seowon glanced around casually, almost confused, like he thought he saw something flicker. With his magic resistance sitting at 90, those flames couldn't even touch him. He started walking toward the mage, slow and steady, making the guy sweat bullets. Panicked, the mage threatened to cast something stronger, flames spiraling in his palms as he screamed out escrow-style flame. A second explosion hit harder than the first, but when the smoke cleared, Seowon strolled out like it was nothing, not a damn burn on him. His eyes locked on the mage's, and with a single piercing fist, he cracked him straight in the chest. The impact ripped shockwaves through the guy's body. Blood gushed from his mouth as he was launched through trees and rubble like a ragdoll. Seowon dropped his fist, stunned at the sheer power. He'd thought the move was weak, but now he wondered if martial arts scale based on inner energy. No time to waste, he finished the mage off clean. Now only 7 players were left. With his stacked resistance, average magic wouldn't even dent him anymore. But he knew deep down with Nam Sagwang out of the way, the real monsters were finally about to show themselves. Seowon was blazing through the forest, moving so damn fast it felt unreal. A grin crept across his face as he realized he could finally pull off the Elder's lightness technique. With a quiet chuckle, he thanked the old man in his head and promised he'd win this thing. An hour later, he was perched silently in a tree, cloaked in invisibility like a ghost. Out of nowhere, a voice barked his name, telling him to quit hiding. A ripped dude in a cape leapt out, swinging a massive sword, demanding a fair fight. He threw shade at Seowon, calling him a coward, then went on introducing himself, Stanko, the big-mouth mercenary. But mid-rant, An arrow sliced through the air. Stanko barely deflected it with his sword and roared in anger, demanding his opponent face him head-on. Siawoon stayed hidden above, curious who just fired that shot. Stanko looked up and spotted an archer perched on a branch. He instantly knew only Zurikana could load that much aura into a single arrow. The archer, a little surprised, asked if he knew him, and Stanko said the legend of the divine archer was famous among mercenaries like them. Since they both wanted to win, he suggested teaming up to take down Siawoon. Zurikana didn't answer. He just dropped down quietly and started walking toward him. Stanko kept yapping, hyping himself up as a well-known merc and pretending they'd make a killer team, all while mocking Zurikana in his head, thinking the guy must be dumb as hell for buying his act. But Zurikana wasn't even focused on that. He was counting seconds on his fingers, wondering if he'd messed up his timing. That's when Stanko sneered, saying an archer should never be dumb enough to close the distance himself. He swung his blade fast, ready to end him, but before he could even blink, an arrow drilled straight through his skull. Zurikana's face twisted in disgust as he spat out that he'd never cooperate with an insect like him. His only interest now was finding out where Siawoon was hiding. Meanwhile, Siawoon crept silently behind him with his cloak, already sucking up the leftover life chi from Stanko's corpse. Suddenly, Zurikana whipped his head back in Siawoon's direction, making him freeze in panic. For a second, he thought the guy had some busted ability that pierced through invisibility. But nah, Zurikana was only checking Stanko's loot. He decided the items were worth keeping, and walked off without another glance. Siawoon exhaled in relief, then locked eyes on Zurikana as his next target. After draining every last drop of Stanko's energy, he noticed a faint glow in the distance, the edge of the restricted zone. Using the Elder's technique, he darted through the dense forest with insane speed. With only 6 survivors left, and 87 days still on the clock, he started thinking the collapse of the zone might be tied to the shrinking number of players. But then the trees broke open into a massive field, and Siawoon's gut instantly screamed bad vibes. Wide, exposed terrain like this was a damn invitation for an ambush. His fears hit home when streaks of green energy ripped through the air, aimed straight at him. He twisted and dodged, the blasts detonating around him in thunderous explosions. Whoever was casting this wasn't spamming randomly. Those shots were laser-locked on his hidden position. Confused and pissed, he couldn't figure out how the hell anyone tracked him. His cloak masked, his breath, his sound, everything. Before he could piece it together, another wave of green energy rained from the damn sky, heavier and nastier than the first. Realizing there was no way to dodge at all, Siawoon ditched his cloak, planted his feet, and poured everything into his core. With a sharp breath, he launched a martial arts strike, a fist glowing with crackling blue energy, straight into the storm of magic. The impact was nuclear, ripping the barrage apart and shaking the entire battlefield with raw force. As the dust finally settles and chunks of debris drop around him, Siawoon just stares at his own damn hand, looking like he can't even process the raw power he just pulled off. No time to sit there in shock, he rockets into the air, scanning the battlefield like a hawk for whoever's left lurking. His eyes lock on some poor bastard hiding in the tree line. Down below, a mage is standing frozen, muttering like a broken record, unable to believe that the massive spell he dumped all his mana into got clapped that easily. But before he can even blink, Siawoon yells out a warning someone's right behind him. Too late. A blade shoves straight through his chest, blood pouring as he stares down at the wound like it doesn't even make sense. Behind him stands a stone-cold assassin, voice flat as hell, telling him he should have saved some juice for detection magic, or at least a barrier. For a killer like him, wiping his presence is child's play. With that execution, the mage's story ends 5 players left in the game. Siawoon drops down onto the grass, landing quiet as a cat. The assassin turns, eyes narrowing as he recognizes him instantly. Jin Siawoon, the one who iced Nam Sagwang. Siawoon asks if he knows him, and the assassin just laughs it off, saying of course he does. He killed the lobby's #1 enemy. The assassin adds that the rest of the survivors must be foaming at the mouth to take him out. He tells Siawoon not to bother resisting, since he's never failed a hit in his life. Then he bolts forward, dual blades flashing, trying to end it fast. Siawoon throws out his signature punch, but the assassin is stupid fast, weaving past and slicing his whole arm like he's Levi on ODM gear. The assassin smirks, admitting he's tougher than expected. Siawoon, meanwhile, knows straight up, without his internal energy keeping him alive, he'd be in pieces already. This guy isn't some weak-ass mage. This is a whole different league. The assassin grins with that cocky predator look, telling him his death's just a countdown, since no one's ever escaped his hunts in the dark. That word dark sticks in Siawoon's head, sparking something. But before he can act on it, the assassin lifts both blades and vanishes like smoke, disappearing into nothing. Caught off guard, Siawoon freezes. He can't feel him at all. Panic creeps in as he realizes the bastard's already behind him, blades raised to carve him apart. But just as the killing strike drops, Siawoon blinks out of sight, gone. Now the assassin's the one panicking, whipping his head around, trying to find him. That's when Siawoon materializes right behind him, silent, cloaked like a ghost. He snatches the assassin's wrist in an iron grip and calmly explains that hiding your body is one thing, but energy always leaves a trail, and he can track it. The assassin loses his cool, cursing him out and calling him a coward for striking from behind. Seowun's eyes go ice cold as he repeats his earlier promise, he's finishing this. The assassin gets desperate, throwing out a bargain, begging to team up and aim for first place together. But before he can even finish the sentence, Seowun cuts him down without a second thought, blood spraying across the clearing. The system chimes in, announcing the assassin's death, and the survivor count drops to 4. Seowun soaks up the life chi from both the fallen players, scooping their healing scrolls in the process. No time to celebrate, he decides to farm quick and get the hell out before more scavengers show up. Digging through the assassin's loot, Seowun finds a shadow clone manual, and it's clear as hell this guy had no business carrying it since he didn't even have internal energy. The thing lets players summon clones to fight for them. Then it clicks. That mage from earlier had a detection spell built to bust stealth skills, but his core was too weak to actually use it. Now Seowun finally gets how the mage spotted him even while invisible. Right as he's piecing this together, an arrow slices his cheek and smacks into the dirt. He spins around, stunned, only to see more arrows raining down. Panic hits this power feels on a whole different level. Too late to run. He decides to tank that shit head on, pouring every ounce of internal energy into his fist. Same move he used to block the mage's attack earlier. He manages to deflect it, but now he's wondering if 2 people are ganging up on him. Then out of nowhere, another player sucker punches him, calling him strong, and sends him skidding back. Seowun realizes he's now facing 3 bastards at once. The one who hit him is none other than Senrich, Cruzen's king, and right behind him the Demon King's right arm, Garon, and the Divine Archer, Zurikana, a squad from hell. And standing against all of them is Seowun, introduced like he's just some normal dude, outnumbered but calm as hell. Centaurk steps forward, cold glare and all, making it clear Seowun's streak of dumb luck is done. On the high ground, the demon mage and archer lock into formation, leaving him boxed in. Seowun feels the frustration kick in. He was this close to a win, and then smacked right into a stacked group. Still, he knows teams like this can crumble if you hit the weak spots. He scans them, searching for cracks, but they're unreadable. Then, out of nowhere, Garon tries brown-nosing, bowing all dramatic to Senrich and calling him by his royal title. The king looks pissed, not impressed at all, and questions his boldness. Garon laughs it off, saying titles don't mean jack here, and that teaming up with shady types is fine if it pays. Watching this clown show, Seowun realizes they weren't even planning to team up. Suddenly, he vanishes under his cloak. The king catches on instantly, and orders Garon to blow his cover. The demon mage throws up a glowing hand, golden light bursting like a damn flare. The whole area floods with brightness, burning away every shadow. Seowun flinches. His stealth cloak is now straight up useless. The mage smirks, thanking Namsagwang for taking care of the archmage, then flips into full villain mode, declaring Seowun's death in the Demon King's name. He unleashes a Chaos Blade spell, the ground ripping open as purple blades spiral out in every direction. Seowun immediately knows the deal. Mages like Garon suck up close. If he rushes before the spell fully detonates, he's got a shot. Dangerous as hell, but he dives in anyway. The blades whip around him, shredding his cloak, spraying blood, but he keeps charging, reinforcing himself with internal energy. The system hits him with bad news. Cloak's busted. Can't be used anymore. Garon watches the explosion, convinced he's finished the job, but nope. Out of the storm of blades comes Seowun, face drenched in blood, looking like a walking nightmare. He goes in with his piercing fist, but Garon's ready, grinning as he summons another spell. Massive undead hands erupt from the ground, grabbing and crushing. The energy in this one feels way nastier than before. Still, Seowun doesn't flinch. He triggers Shadow Clone, body blurring into phantom doubles, weaving through the chaos. Garon's jaw drops. The guy thought Seowun was just some physical bruiser, but now he's throwing illusions too. Seowun roars, charging for the killing blow. But before Garon can finish his barrier, Senrich turns on him, driving a piercing aura blade straight into his back. Blood sprays everywhere, the mage's eyes wide with disbelief. Betrayal hits harder than the blade. Senrich coldly says victory is all that matters, and admits he never intended to work with filth like him anyway. The system confirms the mage's death. Senrich turns to the archer, smirking that he'd been a pain in their army. Ironic they'd end up working side by side. Zurikana just smiles, saying it's too early to count wins. Before the king even processes it, Seowun slams his piercing fist right into his face, launching him straight into the wall with bone-crunching force. Seowun is gasping for air, locked on the archer, saying it's just the 2 of them now. He dares him to step up, but Zurikana just smirks and tells him he's got a way bigger problem in front of him. Out of nowhere, the king rises, mad as hell, claiming he felt the blade cut through him and still stunned that his armor got shredded so easily. By now, our boy Seowun doesn't even look human anymore, drenched head to toe in blood, eyes sharp like a beast. He snarls, asking if the king's gonna take him on alone or if the 2 of them plan to gang up. The king glares, cold as ice, saying he'll regret pushing him to use full strength. Before Seowun can react, pain rips through him. His arm gets stabbed clean by the king's blade. Senrich laughs, bragging that no one matches his speed, explaining he targeted the ligaments so Seo-woon can't even move his arms properly. But Seo-woon ain't about to roll over now. He digs deep, shoving all his inner energy into his body, and with raw force, he shatters the blade with his fist. The king freezes, shocked, while Seo-woon yanks the shard out of his arm and whips it at his face like a damn dagger. Senrich roars in fury, screaming at how he dared scar his face. Seo-woon doesn't waste time. He rips out a healing scroll, patching himself up. The king knows shit's getting serious, so he pulls his trump card, drawing the aura blade glowing with raw power. By then, Seo-woon's arm is healed, and he answers with his shadow clone technique, flooding the place with copies of himself as his energy burns at full throttle. It's clear both of them are ready to throw down their final moves. The archer, looking bored up top, just yells for them to hurry it up. With clones lined up, Seo-woon tells Senrich this is the real fight. The king mocks him, pretending not to care, though deep down he knows his aura blade's timer is down to 2 minutes. He has to end this fast. Seo-woon feels his own energy draining, just as desperate to finish. No more stalling, he storms forward with his army of clones. The king swings his blade like a madman, but there are too many. Out of nowhere, the real Seo-woon slips in behind and smashes him with a palm strike. Senrich lashes back, cursing as he swings, only to cut into another clone. He grows more pissed, deciding to just wipe them all out. But before he can, Seo-woon plants a clean punch to his face, snapping his head sideways and making him cough up blood. While the king struggles to tell what's real, Seo-woon taunts him, saying every damn clone can hit just like him. Then he launches a brutal kick, but Senrich dodges and counters, slicing through 2 clones with his golden aura blade, erasing them instantly. He scoffs, calling them weak, then counts the remaining 5 left. Still, he ain't happy, because that blade has less than a minute left. From the cliff, Zurikana admits he didn't expect Senrich to be struggling like this. Senrich shouts up, begging for help and offering him all the rewards, but the archer just warns him to pay attention, because Seo-woon is coming in hot. The king barely reacts in time, blasting out a crushing wave of aura. Seo-woon dodges, then counters with a bone-crunching fist to the chest, blood spraying from the impact. Their clash continues. Seo-woon's follow-up strike slams into the blade, but it gets blocked. Then Senrich grins like a psycho, lunging in and stabbing deep into what he thinks is the real body. Blood splatters, only for the body to flicker and fade. Another clone. The king freezes, muttering how humiliating this is, then screaming that he doesn't give a damn about winning anymore. Zurikana just watches, entertained. Senrich's aura explodes golden, daring Seo-woon to dodge as he charges, ripping through more clones. When the dust clears, only 2 stand. 1 clone, 1 real. The king narrows his eyes, trying to pick the right one. Before he can, Seo-woon charges in, shouting that it's his turn. He slams in with a piercing fist while a clone flanks with a side strike. The combo connects, smashing the king's face again and forcing blood to spray. In a frenzy, the king stabs through a neck only to realize it was another clone, the body vanishing with no feeling in his blade. That leaves the real Seo-woon standing. Senrich points his sword at him, vowing to end it in 1 strike. The 2 lock eyes, both charging head-on, colliding mid-air with a deafening burst. Senrich snarls, giving him credit for hand-to-hand combat, but then his face darkens and he unleashes his strongest move, Aura Blade Lightning Form. Golden lightning erupts, scorching everything in sight, ripping straight into Seo-woon. The MC staggers, coughing blood, trying to tell him the only one who gains from this madness is the archer, but Senrich doesn't care. He drives his blade into Seo-woon's chest. Exhausted, the king realizes how close he was to losing. Then he looks down. His blade is broken in half. No blood, no body, just another fake. And then Seo-woon is behind him, unleashing a devastating counterattack that tears him apart, splitting Senrich open for good. Standing over the fallen body, Seo-woon thinks coldly that if his clones hadn't drained the bastard's stamina, this fight could have ended way differently. Seo-woon hears the archer running his mouth, saying he didn't expect him to actually beat Senrich. Then he even thanks him for taking care of that pain-in-the-ass bastard. Archer knocks an arrow, smirking that the king's pride made him go all in, and now Seo-woon, who also burned everything to win, has to fall by his hands too. With insane speed, he lets loose a glowing blue arrow. It slices through the air like lightning, giving Seo-woon barely a second to react. His eyes blow wide as that thing barrels at him with terrifying force. Our boy instantly sucks up the life chi from Senk. It's not on Nam Sagwang's level, but it's still enough juice to face the archer. As the blue arrow tears toward him, he pops off his shadow clone technique, splitting into multiple afterimages and bolting up the hill at breakneck speed. From above, Zurikana narrows his eyes, calling the trick annoying as hell. Cocky, he shoots another arrow with pinpoint precision. This one rips into Seo-woon's leg, nailing the real body. Seo-woon crashes down the cliff, pain exploding through him as he smacks the ground. The archer leaps down with a smug grin, saying he's making damn sure his prey doesn't run this time. He draws back, aiming for the arms to pin him to the dirt. Seo-woon Seowon, pissed, demands how he knew which clone was real. Zurikana just shrugs and says he guessed. Looking down with that cocky smile, he admits he respects Seowon's grit, but Seowon spits back that he can shove his respect and give it to the dogs. Archer doesn't even bother replying, just looses one last arrow straight into his skull. Game over. In an instant, Seowon's body flickers and morphs into a chest, same as the others who dropped before him. A booming system voice declares the Cloyd survival game has ended. Next thing, the MC is standing in what looks like another dimension, watching his body turned into loot, muttering that someone else walked away with the prize he worked his ass off for. It stings, but he reminds himself he did the same to Nam Sagwang when that guy was defenseless. A system message congratulates him for making top 2, and tells him he's qualified for the next round. He's floored there really is another game. The message also says he's earned 140 reward coins with all his kill bonuses included. Surrounded by the stash of items he collected, Seowon is told he can spend coins however he wants. Prices vary, but his precious shadow clone technique costs nearly all his coins. At the same time, the system drops the bomb that the top 5 get to spin a roulette for random items. Since he ranked second, he gets 2 spins. That little perk gets him fired up. Maybe he can save a ton of coins if he scores either the Cloak of Invisibility or the Shadow Clone Manual. He spins, praying for a win, but the wheel stops on Escrow's necklace, the cheapest trash item on the list. Rage hits him hard, and he grabs his head, cursing why the worst possible outcome had to pop. With one chance left, he takes a deep breath, steadies himself, and practically begs every god he can think of. The wheel spins again, his heart hammering, and this time it lands on the shadow clone technique. Seowon's fist clenches tight, and he roars in victory. Against all odds, he pulled the most expensive damn prize and saved his coins. The system announces his chosen rewards are being delivered. The Shadow Clone book floats toward him, glowing. He knows once he's finished picking the rest, he'll get moved out. Staring at all the tempting options, he makes his final choices carefully. He can't linger here forever. When he's done, the system praises him, wishes him luck, and the light swallows him whole. Suddenly, he's back in the alley. Confused, he scans his surroundings, trying to piece it together. His eyes drop to his hand, and there it is, the subspace ring from Cloyd Survival. This wasn't a dream. He grabs his bag, shoulders it, and starts walking down the street. His first game is done. The world looks the same, but deep inside, he feels the shift something massive has begun. He stares at the ring, reminding himself the next game is coming. This time, he swears he won't screw it up. He'll aim for first place. Seowon then heads to the studio apartment his parents got for him near the school. He was originally supposed to stay there, study for his English test, and prepare to return to school. However, right now, his only focus is becoming stronger using the things he brought back from the game. As soon as he enters his room, he sits in the lotus position because he has no intention of entering the next game as a complete noob. He quickly notices that his energy core is empty and wonders if he used up all of his inner energy during the final battle. Thinking about it, Seowon decides it would be best to cultivate the way the old man taught him so he can recover as much energy as possible. He recalls the old man's words from the game when he said he wanted to see whether Seowon was capable of becoming as strong as him. 4 hours later, Seowon lets out a frustrated groan because the amount of inner energy he managed to gather is ridiculously small. He realizes that reality is completely different from the game, and at this rate, it could take years before he even feels any noticeable energy inside himself. Deciding not to waste any more time, he starts organizing the items he brought back. While going through them, he finds himself wishing he had obtained a better martial art. Then it suddenly occurs to him that he might have to train the martial art gradually, just like cultivating inner energy. Once he reaches that conclusion, he realizes there is no chance of becoming strong anytime soon. Just then, the system asks whether he would like to learn the martial art. At that moment, Seowon realizes that the system from the game actually works in reality as well. He immediately begins swinging his arms and legs around his room while performing the martial art technique. After finishing the learning process, he notices that it is nowhere near as impressive as when he was overflowing with inner energy. He then checks his storage to see what other items he has and discovers that Escrow's necklace is among them. Since the necklace was supposedly made of pure gold, Seowon bites it to test its authenticity. To his surprise, it is completely real. Judging by its weight, he estimates that the gold alone would be worth at least 10 million won. The moment he realizes that the necklace only costs 1 coin in the game yet holds such enormous value in reality, a greedy goblin-like grin appears on his face. He quickly figures out that he could become rich simply by bringing back 10 of those necklaces from the next game. While the necklace may be worthless in the game world, it is incredibly valuable in reality. Another item he brought back is refined troll's blood, which supposedly guarantees a healthy life for an entire year to anyone who drinks it. He only brought it back because the effect sounded appealing, but now he realizes that if he sold it to some wealthy, terminally ill patient, he could probably charge whatever price he wanted. At this point, Seowon becomes convinced that the game is going to be a massive opportunity for him. Just then, his stomach starts growling loudly. He suddenly realizes that he has been surviving on nothing but terrible food in the game, but he never noticed how hungry he was because he had been so focused on cultivation. Deciding it is finally time to eat some proper food, he heads to a restaurant called Grandma's Dinner and orders a set meal. Before long, the 5001 meal that he once considered a luxury is placed in front of him. As he eats the delicious food, tears begin rolling down his face because he nearly died from living on jerky for so long. The grandmother notices him crying and tells him to stop because he is going to ruin his appetite. She also points out that he was eating at the restaurant just yesterday. Our boy explains that the food is simply too delicious, which is why he is crying. It is then that Seo-woon realizes the time spent inside the game does not carry over into reality. After finishing his meal, he thanks the old woman for the food. The woman tells him to stop whining and encourages him to come back again. As he walks down the street, Seo-woon starts wondering when the next game will begin because he needs more time to gather inner energy before entering it. Then he remembers the ring of strength he brought back and decides to test whether it works in reality the same way it does in the game. After equipping the ring, he decides to try a simple jump. The moment he leaps, he shoots high into the air before quickly landing back on the ground. Seo-woon is stunned by the amount of strength flowing through his body and immediately hopes nobody witnessed what just happened. He knows that if people report his abnormal strength, he could end up dragging himself into serious trouble. He quickly returns to his room because there is something else he wants to test. Earlier, he had no intention of using it, but after seeing how accurately the game's items work in reality, he changes his mind. Reaching into his storage, he pulls out the most expensive item he brought back, the Elixir of Insight, which cost 50 coins. Seo-woon remembers that in the game, using the elixir left him unable to move for 3 hours while his insides felt like they were burning. Even so, he gulps it down. The moment the liquid enters his body, the effect activates instantly. Energy erupts from every pore in his body, causing him to scream in agony. 3 hours later, Seo-woon's neighbor ends up calling the police because the wall separating their rooms has become hot. When 2 officers arrive, the woman explains that she tried knocking on her neighbor's door, but the handle was too hot to touch. The officers tell her she should have called the fire department instead. The woman argues that although everything was hot, there was no sign of a fire. One of the officers suggests that the resident probably turned the boiler up too high. However, the old woman insists that something is clearly wrong. To settle the matter, one of the officers approaches the door and grabs the handle. The instant he touches it, he yells in pain because it burns his hand. The old woman immediately takes the chance to tell them she was right. The officers begin calling for the resident and tell Seo-woon to open the door. Hearing them, Seo-woon slowly opens it. The officers are shocked to see sweat pouring down his face. Seo-woon casually explains that he has a bit of a fever and simply turned up the boiler. Even though his face is bright red from the heat, he still jokes that the fire department should have been called instead of the police. The officers explain that they still have to respond whenever someone files a complaint. They ask if he needs an ambulance, but Seo-woon refuses, claiming it is only a mild cold and that some rest will solve everything. Since he insists that he is fine, the officers eventually leave. Before going, they tell the old woman not to call them over issues like this, because it only creates unnecessary work for them. After closing the door, Seo-woon collapses onto the floor while thinking about how close he came to dying. The energy inside the elixir had boiled through his body like fire, and if he had not possessed the white martial physique arts, he would never have been able to contain it. This makes him realize that unlike the game, using elixirs in reality still carries significant risks. Even so, he wants to test his skills. He uses Unstoppable Fist and thrusts his palm forward. A powerful force instantly erupts and completely destroys his chair. Seeing the result, Seo-woon understands just how effective the techniques are. At the same time, he realizes he is going to have to sell some of the items he brought back if he wants enough money to replace the chair he just destroyed. The following day, Seo-woon heads to a public outdoor gym to practice and improve his skills. Unfortunately, he quickly realizes it was a bad idea because the place is packed with people. While training, he notices a group of delinquent high school students. Their leader is smoking a cigarette when an elderly man approaches and tells him that students should not be smoking. The teenager rudely tells the old man to get lost, claiming that even his own parents do not complain about his smoking. The old man responds by saying that his parents must have done a poor job raising him. The comment instantly angers the teenager, and Seo-woon can tell things are about to get ugly. The boy raises his hand to slap the old man, but before he can do anything, Seo-woon suddenly appears and kicks him directly in the face. The teenager is launched into a nearby wall and ends up completely helpless. Seo-woon confidently tells him that no matter how rude the old man was, he has no right to hit an elderly person. At that moment, a much larger high school student arrives. Seo-woon quickly realizes the situation has become far more troublesome than he intended. It turns out the boy he just kicked is the larger student's younger brother. The older brother asks whether Seo-woon was responsible for beating him up. Seo-woon replies that the younger brother started the problem by showing no respect toward an elder. He goes on to explain that students should know smoking in public can get them into trouble. He even laughs and tells the older brother that he should have educated his sibling better. Seo-woon admits he may have gone a little too far, but claims he had no other choice. While he is still talking, the bigger student suddenly throws a punch at him. Seo-woon effortlessly dodges the attack and responds with a punch of his own. The hit sends the larger student flying. The teenager groans in pain and coughs up blood. Seeing this, Seo-woon immediately panics because he failed to control his strength properly. Instead of backing down, the teenager becomes even more reckless. He pulls out a butterfly knife and declares that he is going to kill Seo-woon. Watching this, Seo-woon realizes the two brothers are exactly alike. The older brother charges forward and slashes with the knife, but Seo-woon easily avoids the attack. The teenager swings again, yet Seo-woon dodges once more without any difficulty. As the fight continues, Seo-woon realizes that battling ordinary people is far too easy for him now. Growing tired of the knife attacks, he sweeps low and kicks the teenager's foot, knocking him to the ground. Before attacking again, Seo-woon reminds himself that he must control his power. If something goes terribly wrong, his life could be ruined. He decides to use only half of his strength and strikes, with the undefeated palm strike. Even at 50% power, the teenager is launched through the air. He crashes into a tree, and his face ends up horribly disfigured. Everyone nearby watches in shock and immediately begins taking pictures. Ironically, Seo-woon is even more shocked than the spectators because he never intended to hit the guy that hard. Nervously, he even jokes with the unconscious teenager, telling him to stop pretending. Seo-woon then walks over to the two brothers and warns them to behave themselves from now on. Before the situation can become even messier, he quickly leaves the scene. As he walks away, regret begins to fill his mind. He realizes it was a terrible idea to display his strength against ordinary people. If either of the brothers had died, his life would have been completely ruined. Because of that, Seo-woon concludes that he desperately needs proper training so he can gain perfect control over his strength. A month passes, and Seo-woon is meditating in his room when he receives a call from his mother. She asks whether he has eaten, and explains that she became worried because she had not heard from him in a while. She then asks how the academy is going, and Seo-woon replies that it is manageable. Obviously, he cannot tell her that he has been spending his time training in martial arts instead of studying. He asks about his father, but his mother suddenly delivers shocking news. His father was involved in a car accident. Seo-woon immediately panics and starts asking how serious it is and how it happened. His mother explains that the accident occurred while his father was making deliveries. A car had run a red light and crashed into him. To make matters worse, the surgery costs are extremely high, and she is already worried about how they will pay for it. Then she says something that breaks Seo-woon's heart, asking if he has any money left from his allowance that he could send to help them. Trying to stay calm, Seo-woon asks how much the surgery will cost. His mother tells him it will be around 1 to 2 million won. Hearing that, Seo-woon reaches into his storage and takes out Escrow's necklace. He tells his mother not to worry because he may have a way to solve the problem. Promising to call her back soon, he immediately leaves his room. As he rushes out, memories of his parents flood his mind. They had spent their entire lives moving from one rented house to another, constantly struggling to get by. His father worked harder than anyone he knew, yet as he grew older, his income continued shrinking. Since his job could easily be replaced by someone else, he was forced to switch workplaces repeatedly. Thinking about all of this, Seo-woon cannot stop the tears from falling. He feels like he has been a burden on his family ever since he was born. However, he decides that he is done being that helpless child. Soon, he arrives at a jewelry shop and asks an attendant how much the necklace is worth. After examining it, the woman admits that it is an exceptionally well-crafted piece, though it does not appear to be a local item. Seo-woon quickly lies and claims that the necklace has been passed down through his family for 5 generations. Before the woman can continue talking, he simply asks for its value. She questions whether he really wants to sell it to a shop because it could be worth much more elsewhere. Seo-woon explains that his father urgently needs surgery and that he has no other choice. Understanding the situation, and knowing that he lacks any certificate of authenticity, the woman decides to help him. Shortly afterward, the deal is completed, and Seo-woon receives more than 10 million won. He knows that amount will be enough to keep his parents financially secure for the time being. He can also tell from the attendant's excitement that he probably sold the necklace for less than its true value, but he is not upset because what he needed was quick cash. Instead, he concludes that he simply needs to find better ways to sell future items he brings back from the game. Afterward, Seo-woon sends a large amount of money to his mother and immediately calls her. She is stunned when she sees how much he transferred and asks where he got that kind of money. Worried, she even wonders if he took out a loan. Seo-woon lies and tells her that it came from savings he accumulated during his time in the army. His mother apologizes for causing him trouble, but Seo-woon reassures her that she has nothing to worry about. He also promises that he will visit the hospital soon. Later, while riding a train home, he overhears several people talking about a video that is spreading online. The video supposedly shows a man launching a fireball from his palm. Everyone discussing it is amazed, but Seo-woon immediately recognizes it as a spell from Cloyd's survival. A cold sweat runs down his face as he realizes that he is not the only person in Korea who has been pulled into the game. Moments later, the video disappears again, and the men complain that it keeps getting deleted every time someone uploads it. Elsewhere, an agency is holding a meeting about these mysterious videos. The boss demands to know what is happening, and his subordinates explain that the number of survivors has increased dramatically, making it difficult to keep track of everyone. Furious, the boss throws an ashtray at the employee who spoke and shouts that the number of agents should have increased along with the growing number of survivors. He also orders them to bring in the person who keeps uploading the fireball video, believing him to be an attention seeker. The employee quickly assures his boss that he will handle it, but the boss only gets angrier and yells at him to stop bleeding because if blood stains his carpet, he will kill him. Another agent steps forward and uses a healing ability on the injured man. In the end, the boss screams at all of his subordinates to get moving and bring the entire situation under control. Another month passes, and throughout that entire time, Seo-woon never stops training. During those 2 months of preparation, he manages to gather a decent amount of inner energy and has even become accustomed to using it. However, his biggest problem is that his current reserves are still far too low. With the amount of inner energy he possesses right now, he can only summon a single shadow clone, and even then, it cannot remain active for very long. Despite this limitation, Seo-woon uses the clone as a sparring partner because it provides an efficient way to train. Unfortunately, the training sessions never last long since the clone disappears so quickly. This leaves him disappointed because, back in the game, he was able to control 8 shadow clones simultaneously while fighting Censure. He starts wondering if he burned through too much inner energy during that battle, because his current Dantian feels incredibly pathetic in comparison. After finishing his training for the night, Seo-woon decides to return home and continue cultivating. He knows there is no point dwelling on the past or complaining about his current condition. As he heads back, he notices that he is feeling a little hungry after all the training. Because of that, he decides to check his subspace storage to see whether there is anything useful inside that he might have forgotten about. While sorting through the contents of his storage, a bright light suddenly engulfs him. Before he can react, he is instantly transported back to the game lobby, where numerous other players are already gathered and waiting. Seo-woon quickly looks around and notices that several people seem just as confused as he was during his first experience with the game. While he is still trying to confirm whether he has truly returned to the game world, a message appears before him thanking the participants. The system then announces that a tutorial for the game will now be provided. Hearing this, Seo-woon is genuinely surprised because the tutorial was completely skipped during his first entry. A smile appears on his face as he realizes what this means. Since a tutorial is being given, there must be a large number of new players participating this time. Looking around further, he spots a high school student casually sitting on top of the giant statue. Judging from the uniform, the boy is clearly a Korean high school student. Seo-woon immediately ignores him because the guy is obviously trying to attract attention and show off, something he considers typical behavior for modern teenagers. Even so, Seo-woon suspects that the student has participated in the game before. All he can do is hope that the kid is nowhere near as powerful as Nam. A short while later, the participants are informed that a total of 200 players are taking part in the current game. They are also told that the minimum requirement is simply to survive and remain within the top 200 rankings. The selected map for this round is the Valley of Contras, and rewards will begin being distributed starting from rank 20. The moment Seo-woon reads that information, he immediately realizes there is practically no risk of failing the basic objective. Since survival alone guarantees success, he comes to a simple conclusion. If there is no risk of failure, then he is free to play this game as recklessly and aggressively as he wants. After the tutorial ends, Seo-woon is already expecting everyone to be thrown straight into the game. However, something completely unexpected happens. The system announces that this round will be a duo game, and instructs all players to find a partner for duo registration. The rules explain that the match will continue until only one team remains alive. Even if only one member of a team survives until the end, both teammates will still receive the rewards. Another notification appears, informing everyone that they have 5 minutes to either form a duo or enter the game alone. Seo-woon quickly realizes that the player count is much higher this time, which is probably why the system introduced the duo format. Even so, he is not a fan of teaming up because a useless teammate would only become dead weight. The first person who comes to mind is the high school student he noticed earlier, since the guy seems likely to be a capable player. Unfortunately, when Seo-woon looks toward the top of the statue, the student has already disappeared. With no better option, Seo-woon starts searching for anyone willing to partner with him. He moves around the lobby asking other players, but most of them have already found teammates. He continues searching desperately until the timer nearly expires, yet he still fails to find anyone. Accepting reality, Seo-woon decides that playing solo is better than wasting any more time. As soon as the countdown ends, the game begins and all participants are deployed into the Valley of Contras. Looking down from the sky, Seo-woon spots several villages scattered throughout the valley, and chooses one that seems promising for looting. His plan is simple: land there and eliminate anyone who gets in his way. The moment he touches the ground, he notices 3 other teams landing nearby. Without hesitating, he immediately rushes toward one of the landing zones. Ever since the end of the first game, he has replayed every moment of it countless times in his mind. He spent months running endless mental simulations and preparing for this exact opportunity. One unfortunate player is still suffering from motion sickness when Seo-woon suddenly appears behind him and lands a devastating punch. The player cries out in pain and demands to know why he is being attacked, but Seo-woon completely ignores him and knocks him unconscious. Right then, the system informs Seo-woon that he must finish the opponent because the player's teammate still has a chance to revive him. Seo-woon is actually impressed by this mechanic and immediately finishes the job. However, the moment he does, the victim's teammate appears. The newcomer is clearly a tank-type fighter. He charges aggressively at Seo-woon, sending a chill through his body. The impact forces Seo-woon backward, but he manages to maintain his balance and avoid falling. The opponent is covered in armor and carries a lance. He asks if Seo-woon was the one who killed his teammate, but Seo-woon ignores the question and focuses on analyzing him instead. From what he can see, the enemy specializes in close-range combat. Since Unstoppable Fist relies on fighting with bare hands, Seo-woon knows that dealing with weapons such as spears, swords, and bows is one of its greatest weaknesses. In reality, facing armed opponents head-on is incredibly dangerous, which is why he has spent so much time practicing through image training. Rather than feeling afraid, Seo-woon actually smiles because he finally has a chance to test the techniques he has been working on. The armored player thrusts his lance forward, and Seo-woon immediately moves in. Just before the sharp tip can strike him, he uses his palm to redirect the lance and alter its trajectory. The sudden movement creates an opening, and the opponent is shocked to see his attack deflected so easily. Before he can react, Seo-woon unleashes a powerful spatial strike. The attack tears a massive hole through the man's chest. Not giving him any chance to recover, Seo-woon crushes the man's helmet and then stomps his head with his foot, wiping out the entire team. The moment the enemy dies, his chi flows into Seo-woon. He is surprised by the amount he absorbs and admits that nothing compares to the efficiency of gathering chi inside the game. With one team eliminated, Seo-woon calculates that 4 players remain in the area around him. Unfortunately, he does not even get a moment to rest. An arrow suddenly flies toward his head, and he barely manages to dodge it in time. The projectile buries itself in a nearby wall. Seo-woon quickly traces the arrow's path, trying to locate the shooter, but before he can do anything, another arrow streaks toward him. This one comes dangerously close and slices across the left side of his face. He barely has time to react before multiple arrows begin raining toward him. Realizing he cannot stay exposed, Seo-woon immediately sprints into the forest. As he runs, he is forced to admit that the archer's accuracy is frightening, especially from such a long distance. For a brief moment, he wonders if the shooter might be Zuro, but he quickly dismisses the idea because the attacks are nowhere near Zuro's level. While weaving through the trees, Seo-woon starts considering the possibility that the archer may have a teammate nearby. Even so, he is not overly concerned. In his mind, the moment he pinpoints the archer's location, that hidden teammate will inevitably reveal themselves as well. Seo-woon soon reaches the rooftops and finds himself comparing the current game to his first one. Back then, he would have been focused entirely on looting and hiding, but things are different now. His main goal is gathering chi, which means every enemy player has essentially become a source of fuel for his growth. Just then, an arrow suddenly strikes him straight in the head, seemingly blowing a hole through it. However, the archer immediately senses that something is off. Even though he appears to have landed a perfect shot, Seo-woon somehow vanishes from the rooftop. What the archer doesn't realize is that he only destroyed Seo-woon's shadow clone. Before he can process what happened, the real Seo-woon appears inside the room where he is hiding and delivers a powerful kick that sends him crashing to the ground. Surprisingly, Seo-woon quickly realizes that he didn't hit the real archer either. Moments later, the actual archer appears behind him, revealing that he had been using the cloak of hiding. The archer immediately fires multiple arrows, but Seo-woon dodges every attack. Realizing he is at a disadvantage, the archer leaps out of the building and tries to escape. Seo-woon chases after him, eventually cutting off his path. He tells the archer that using such a valuable cloak in broad daylight was a foolish decision. According to Seo-woon, if the archer had simply hidden and camped, he could have easily climbed much higher in the rankings. Just as Seo-woon is about to finish him off, the archer's teammate suddenly arrives. Now facing 2 opponents, Seo-woon finds himself trapped between an archer and a swordsman wielding dual blades. For a moment, he regrets not killing the archer immediately before reinforcements arrived. Still, there is no point dwelling on it because he is now stuck in a 2 versus 1 battle. Then an interesting thought occurs to him. While it looks like he is outnumbered, he actually has the advantage because he can create additional numbers. As the 2 enemies prepare to attack, Seo-woon summons a shadow clone and immediately runs. The archer targets him and fires a triple shot attack that seemingly kills him instantly. The archer smiles in satisfaction, only for Seo-woon to suddenly appear behind him and drive an attack straight through his chest before he can react. Seo-woon mocks him, explaining that just because his eyes tell him someone is standing in a certain place does not mean that person is actually there. With the archer defeated, only the dual sword user remains. The swordsman concludes that Seo-woon must be some kind of illusionist because of all the strange tricks he keeps using. Seo-woon casually responds that he is merely a returning student and reminds the man that if he wants to revive his teammate, he will have to defeat him first. The swordsman rushes forward at incredible speed, declaring that not only will he beat Seo-woon, but he will also survive until the very end of the game. He unleashes a powerful double strike attack, and Seo-woon prepares a counter, but his plan immediately falls apart because he underestimated his opponent's speed. Before he can react, the swordsman has already slipped behind him. Seo-woon instantly realizes that he would have died on the spot if he had not reinforced his body with inner energy. The swordsman confidently points out that surviving such an attack is impressive and admits that Seo-woon possesses more than just illusion tricks. He then warns Seo-woon that his neck will be the next target. While analyzing the situation, Seo-woon realizes that if he cannot finish this opponent in a single hit, he needs to find another way to counter him. More specifically, he has to overcome the swordsman's overwhelming movement speed. Then something clicks in his mind. Since this game mode has no penalty for failure, there is a risky method he can attempt. Instead of relying on his eyes to track the enemy, he decides to sense his opponent through energy and killing intent. As the swordsman charges again, Seo-woon closes his eyes. He knows that if he cannot overcome an obstacle this early, he has no chance of reaching first place. After 2 months of cultivating inner energy, he is no longer the same person he used to be. By the time he opens his eyes again, the fight is already over. He has successfully taken down the swordsman and pinned him to the ground. The defeated player struggles furiously and demands to know how Seo-woon managed to block his ultimate attack so easily. Instead of answering, Seo-woon slams the man's head into the ground and finishes him off. At that moment, he realizes that he has broken through yet another personal wall. With 2 entire teams eliminated, the player count drops to 196. The swordsman leaves behind a large amount of chi, which Seo-woon happily absorbs. Afterward, he searches through the archer's loot and discovers a recovery scroll, which he uses immediately. Unfortunately, he also realizes that the cloak of hiding was damaged during their battle. The discovery is painful because he knows that such an item could have easily carried him toward the top rankings. Even so, he decides to keep it, since it may still prove useful later. Continuing his search, he finds a lightning-struck cottonwood bow, a weapon capable of firing arrows infused with faint lightning energy. Seo-woon does not fully understand what the system means by lightning energy because he never felt anything unusual from the arrows fired at him earlier. Alongside the bow, he also finds a multi-shot skill book that allows users to fire multiple arrows simultaneously. This revelation makes him realize that the archer was not originally an archer at all and had learned the skill inside the game. Seo-woon immediately learns the technique himself and decides to test it. The arrow he fires creates a surprisingly destructive impact, convincing him that this bow is far superior to the crossbow he used during the previous game. Satisfied with his gains, Seo-woon decides to take a short break, gather more loot, and recover before continuing his hunt. After spending some time searching through the houses, Seo-woon fails to find anything particularly valuable and concludes that it is simply because they are ordinary village homes. He starts wondering whether there might be rare items hidden somewhere, similar to the cloak of hiding. While standing near a window, he notices a tall tower in the center of the town and immediately figures that such a landmark would be one of the best places to find loot. He heads straight there and notices that the door is still locked, which suggests that nobody has entered it yet. After going inside, he closes the door behind him just to be safe and begins climbing toward the top. Unfortunately, when he finally reaches the highest floor, he finds absolutely nothing useful. The discovery leaves him completely disappointed. Frustrated, he punches the wall and complains about how things never seem to go according to plan in this game. While looking out from the tower, he suddenly notices 2 players below, casually looting houses as though they were the only participants in the entire match. As he considers how to deal with them, he sees the pair heading directly toward the tower. Because the door is closed, they assume nobody has entered before them. The moment they step inside, they discover a healing scroll and immediately treat it as a sign of good luck. Watching from above, Seo-woon realizes he completely overlooked that scroll because it was buried among so much worthless junk. Still, he is thankful he missed it because it ended up becoming the perfect bait. Seeing how excited they are over a simple healing scroll, Seo-woon quickly concludes that the 2 players are complete beginners. Without wasting a second, Seo-woon dives down from above, aiming to take them out before they can react. The 2 players notice a shadow suddenly appearing on the ground, and before they understand what is happening, Seo-woon lands between them. Just from the fact that the mage does not immediately cast a barrier, Seo-woon can tell that the guy is inexperienced. He instantly targets the mage and lands a punch. Before he can finish him off, however, the mage unleashes a flame attack. Seo-woon dodges it effortlessly, causing the spell to strike the mage's own teammate instead. The burning incoming player immediately yells at the mage for setting him on fire. The mage hurriedly apologizes, explaining that he was aiming for Seo-woon. Once the flames die down, the two finally realize that Seo-woon is fighting alone without a teammate and decide to gang up on him. The axe-wielding player swings repeatedly, but Seo-woon effortlessly dodges every attack. The more the axe user attacks, the more frustrated he becomes. Unbeknownst to him, Seo-woon is carefully manipulating his movements and guiding him exactly where he wants him to go. Eventually, the axe swings right into the mage. The axe user immediately apologizes and claims it was an accident, while the mage says he understands but desperately asks him to pull the weapon out. Before that can happen, Seo-woon suddenly appears behind the mage and smashes his head in, finishing him off. He even mocks the axe user, thanking him for helping him land the final blow. Seo-woon admits that he originally wanted to kill both of them with a single strike, but the axe user's armor covering his chest complicated things. Looking at the heavily armored player, Seo-woon wonders if the weight of the armor is slowing him down due to the usual mobility drawbacks that come with heavy equipment. Enraged, the axe user attacks again, but Seo-woon leaps into the air to avoid the strike. The man watches in horror as Seo-woon descends with a powerful kick aimed directly at his head. Seo-woon then jumps away again, prompting the axe user to confidently declare that he cannot stay airborne forever. The moment Seo-woon comes back within range, the player unleashes a devastating aura strike. The attack slices through Seo-woon and nearly cuts the tower in half. Seo-woon admits that the man's raw power is impressive, but points out that brute force alone will not get him out of this situation. Furious, the axe user charges forward again and tells Seo-woon to keep talking once he is dead. The battle continues to intensify as Seo-woon blocks and avoids the attacks. What the axe user does not realize is that he is actually fighting a shadow clone the entire time. Meanwhile, the real Seo-woon is standing behind him, openly mocking him for battling a shadow. When Seo-woon steps out from the building, the player finally notices him and demands to know when he got there. Seo-woon completely ignores the question and instead focuses on the tower that was nearly split apart by the aura strike. He jokingly asks the man whether he is curious about what would happen if someone kicked the weakened structure. Then he does exactly that. While the confused player continues asking who he has been fighting all this time, it finally dawns on him that his opponent was never real. Panic immediately sets in as he realizes the tower is collapsing. He desperately begs Seo-woon to save him, but it is already too late. The tower crashes down on top of him and kills him instantly. Only after the man dies does Seo-woon realize a major mistake. Since the player was crushed by the tower instead of being directly killed by him, he does not receive credit for the kill. Annoyed with himself, he calls himself an idiot for overlooking something so obvious. Fortunately, the loot chest still spawns beneath the rubble. Seo-woon is relieved because otherwise he would have been forced to dig through the wreckage like a dog searching for scraps. He begins opening the chests and discovers a variety of useful items, including rings and manuals. Once he finishes looting everything, he decides it is time to move on. Among the items, he even finds a mage's robe that can block wind and rain, although it provides no actual defensive benefits. Around this time, he notices that the safe zone is beginning to shrink. Marking the center of the map as his destination, he prepares to head there. After checking the remaining houses and finding nothing else worth taking, Seo-woon leaves the village behind. Although the journey ahead is quite long, he is able to travel much faster thanks to mastering the same movement technique that the old man once used. A short while later, Seo-woon arrives at an area where the system informs him that he has entered a monster spawn zone. Apparently, certain maps contain designated areas where monsters continuously appear. The system also explains that a boss monster can spawn in these zones, and defeating it rewards players with a special item. On top of that, there are buff monsters that grant temporary bonuses to whoever kills them. Seo-woon quickly realizes that this game contains far more mechanics than the previous one, and immediately complains about the system failing to provide such important information beforehand. Before he can think much more about it, a piercing screech echoes through the area, forcing him to cover his ears. Looking toward the source, he discovers two players fighting monsters nearby. Taking advantage of their distraction, Seo-woon quietly sneaks closer and observes them. The pair consists of a mage and a swordsman. The swordsman cuts down monsters with his blade techniques, while the mage supports him from behind by firing lightning spells. Seeing an opportunity, Seo-woon draws his bow and takes aim. An arrow suddenly flies toward the duo and barely misses the mage. Realizing they are under attack, the mage immediately warns his teammate that they are being ambushed, and urges him to stop fighting the monsters so they can deal with the hidden enemy. However, the swordsman refuses, insisting that they are almost finished with the monsters and should secure the rewards first. The mage argues that rewards will not matter if another player wipes them out. Watching from afar, Seo-woon notices the growing disagreement between them and decides to take full advantage of their internal conflict. Seo-woon continues firing lightning-infused arrows at the pair. The mage barely manages to block the attacks and is immediately told by the swordsman to put up another barrier. Annoyed, The mage snaps back that he already knows that, and quickly creates another defensive barrier. Even so, he doubts it will last much longer, and suggests retreating. The swordsman stubbornly refuses because abandoning the fight now would mean losing all the rewards from the monsters. He insists that they finish the monsters first, and deal with the ambusher afterward. Just then, the barrier shatters. In response, the mage erects a large defensive wall. Seeing this, the swordsman completely loses his temper and demands to know what the mage is thinking. Meanwhile, Xiaowen is secretly delighted because the wall makes things even easier for him. Inside the enclosure, the mage explains that constantly casting barriers wastes too much mana, so he believes a wall is a better solution. The swordsman immediately points out the obvious flaw. The wall also prevents them from locating their attacker. The mage argues that Xiaowen will not be able to cross the wall anyway, but the swordsman reminds him that the wall practically announces their exact location. The mage insists that they simply keep fighting until the wall disappears. As they continue battling the monsters, the swordsman warns that he will disband their team if the mage pulls something this stupid again. Their argument is interrupted when the wall proves completely useless. A rain of arrows suddenly descends on them from above. Although they survive the first barrage, the swordsman urgently asks whether the wall can be removed. The mage reveals that it will take around 5 minutes. Outside the wall, Xiaowen calmly pulls out a magic explosion scroll. The scroll detonates 10 seconds after activation. He attaches it to an arrow, counts to 5, and then fires it directly into the enclosure. While the two teammates continue arguing, the arrow lands between them and erupts into a massive explosion that devastates everything around it. After the blast, one of the serpents from the area charges towards Xiaowen, but he casually kills it with a single strike. Moments later, the mage crawls out of the rubble, only to realize that surviving the explosion was a mistake. The instant he lifts his head, he finds himself staring down Xiaowen's arrow. Xiaowen mockingly thanks the mage for voluntarily trapping themselves behind the wall, explaining that this is exactly why he is about to profit from their loot. Knowing he is already finished, the mage simply closes his eyes. Xiaowen fires an arrow through his head, and a chest immediately appears. He quickly realizes that the swordsman had already died in the explosion. Going through the loot, Xiaowen discovers the 7-star cultivation art manual, which serves as the foundation for the 7-star sword art. The system asks whether he wants to replace white physique arts with the new cultivation technique, but he immediately refuses. That makes the manual practically useless to him, although he is relieved that not everything is worthless. Inside the swordsman's chest, he finds Tokar's ring, and concludes that this item was probably what allowed the man to survive the explosion long enough to leave a chest behind. Afterward, Xiaowen searches the rubble for the mage's chest. He is thrilled when he opens it and discovers another escrow's necklace. He also finds a grimoire, but its requirements are far beyond his current level, making it impossible to learn. Once the looting is finished, Xiaowen turns his attention to the remaining serpents that had been troubling the duo. He wipes them out with ease, and is honestly disappointed that the two players struggled against such weak monsters. To his surprise, the serpents drop items after dying. One of the drops is called Tears of Lamia, a material used for magical experiments and item crafting. He also obtains Tyron's necklace, which slightly boosts agility. While he immediately recognizes the usefulness of the necklace, he has no idea what practical purpose the Tears of Lamia serve. Finally, Xiaowen finds a quiet location and begins cultivating his inner energy. As he meditates, he starts considering whether he should hunt one of the buff monsters to gain an advantage. At the same time, he wonders if he is currently strong enough to challenge a boss monster. More importantly, he cannot help but question whether the other players are already thinking along the same lines. On the second day, Xiaowen checks the remaining player count and realizes that 60 participants have already died. Out of those eliminations, only 8 belong to him, which he does not find particularly impressive. With that in mind, he decides to continue moving toward the marker he previously placed at the center of the map. As he travels through the scorching desert, he cannot help but miss the pleasant weather from the first game. The heat is so intense that he starts wondering whether it would have been smarter to wait until sunset before traveling. While making his way across the desert, he suddenly spots a bird flying overhead, carrying a chest. Instantly suspecting that it is a supply drop, Xiaowen wastes no time and begins chasing after it. He manages to reach it before anyone else, but just as he is about to open the chest, the system issues a warning. If he opens the supply drop, his location will be revealed every 30 minutes for the next 6 hours through a red beacon of light. Despite the obvious danger, Xiaowen decides the potential rewards are worth the risk and opens the chest anyway. The moment the chest is opened, a red light shoots into the sky and exposes his location. Immediately feeling the pressure, Xiaowen knows he has to collect the loot and disappear before other players arrive. Fortunately, the first item he finds completely justifies the risk. Inside the chest is another cloak of hiding. On top of that, he discovers a red cloud pill, a spiritual elixir capable of greatly increasing inner energy. The drawback, however, is that it leaves the user unable to move for 10 hours after consumption. He also finds a 4th circle stone, an item that allows someone to master 4th circle magic or higher, but using it causes the user to remain immobile for 3 hours. The final major reward is the Windblade Grimoire, which grants the Cloudstride skill and allows the user to move like the wind. The speed of the technique scales with the user's internal energy. After reviewing everything, Seowon realizes that the Cloak of Hiding is nearly useless during broad daylight, while the Red Cloud Pill and 4th Circle Stone are too risky to use right now. Even so, he knows that surviving the next 6 hours will make the supply drop more than worthwhile. Since he cannot use the other items immediately, he decides to learn the Cloudstride skill first, so he can escape danger more effectively. After mastering the technique, Seowon begins racing across the desert at incredible speed. However, it is not long before he senses enemies heading toward his location. Since they are still some distance away, he believes he can outrun them, but he remains cautious because he has no idea what tracking abilities or movement skills they might possess. To throw them off his trail, Seowon comes up with a simple trick. He drops a chest and hides nearby, hoping the pursuers will take the bait. Before long, 2 players arrive and discover the chest. They almost realize it is a decoy, but their attention is caught when they find the Tears of Lamia inside. The duo appears to consist of a Roman-style warrior and a mage. After examining the chest, the warrior concludes that Seowon must have looted the supply drop as quickly as possible before fleeing the area. Convinced of this theory, the pair begins following the direction they believe he escaped in. Hidden nearby, Seowon watches everything unfold and is pleased that they fell for the trap so easily. Knowing the red beacon will reveal his position again in only 30 minutes, he decides that his top priority is creating as much distance between himself and his pursuers as possible before the next signal appears. 30 minutes later, Seowon is taking a short rest when he uses detection magic to check his surroundings. To his surprise, the number of players chasing him has increased significantly. Even though they are not right on top of him yet, they are definitely getting closer. This makes him wonder whether a large number of players have already gathered around the center of the map. Just then, the red beacon activates again. The moment it reveals his location, massive fireballs begin raining down from the sky. Seowon immediately dashes away and barely escapes before the explosions hit. Watching the destruction behind him, he suddenly realizes how quickly his pursuers are closing the distance. The speed at which they are catching up is alarming, making him suspect that they are using some sort of movement technique. A moment later, 2 figures emerge from the flames, and Seowon is shocked when he realizes they are riding horses. As the pair rapidly closes in on him, he activates his shadow clone technique. Unfortunately, the clones are destroyed almost instantly. Rather than confusing the pursuers, it only seems to make them even more determined to kill him. The Roman warrior suddenly hurls a spear at him, catching Seowon completely off guard. He cannot believe they have already seen through his tricks. The spear narrowly misses his head but slices across his face before embedding itself in the ground. Seowon immediately grabs the spear, channels his inner energy into it, and throws it back. The weapon flies with terrifying force and pierces straight through the warrior's arm, even breaking through his armor. The warrior instantly realizes that Seowon is far more dangerous than he originally thought, and admits to his teammate that they would have been in serious trouble if Seowon had allies backing him up. Before the confrontation can continue, arrows suddenly come flying in from behind. Seowon dodges them, but the projectiles strike the horses instead. He barely has time to react before another volley follows, finishing the horses off completely. Turning around, Seowon discovers that a new team has arrived. It is a duo of archers, and he has now become trapped between 2 enemy teams. The situation leaves him deeply frustrated because getting caught in a pincer attack is one of the worst positions he could possibly be in. Interestingly, neither team immediately attacks. Instead, they hesitate and keep their distance, each waiting to see who will deal with Seowon first. Picking up on this hesitation, Seowon begins taunting the archers and asks where all their confidence from earlier disappeared to. He points out the obvious reality of the situation. Among the 3 teams present, at least 2 teams are not making it out alive. Seowon quickly figures out what both sides are thinking. The archers would prefer to have him join them, so they can eliminate the Roman warrior and mage first. If they kill Seowon immediately, they would be left in a risky 2 versus 2 battle with no guarantee of victory. From their perspective, turning the fight into a 2 versus 1 would be much safer. Realizing this, Seowon starts formulating a plan and waits to see who will take the bait first. Meanwhile, the Roman warrior loudly boasts and challenges everyone to come at him. His mage teammate immediately tells him to calm down because provoking enemies will only make things worse. Seowon can tell that the warrior is brave, but not particularly smart. The archers respond with threats of their own, declaring that nobody from the kingdom will leave the battlefield alive. They appear to be elves, and they even promise Seowon that they will spare him if he chooses to side with them. Listening to both sides argue, Seowon realizes there is clearly a lot happening in this world, and its various factions that he still knows nothing about. While the 2 teams continue trying to recruit him, Seowon suddenly pulls out the 4th circle stone. He points out to the mage that he surely understands how valuable such an item is. He then turns toward the elves and mentions that the stone could be sold for an enormous fortune as well. Before anyone can react, Seo-woon places the stone on the ground and presents his proposal. According to him, whichever team wins the fight should claim the stone as the reward. He argues that this solution is much fairer than him personally choosing a side. The moment he finishes speaking, Seo-woon leaps away and leaves the two teams staring at each other. In reality, the stone is nothing more than bait. He knows perfectly well that nobody has enough time to properly use a fourth circle stone within the next 6 hours. To him, sacrificing the item is a small price to pay if it can keep 4 dangerous players occupied. Besides, whoever survives the fight will likely come after him afterward, meaning he can simply take the stone back later. As he speeds through the desert using Cloud Stride, Seo-woon cannot help but sigh when he remembers one painful fact. The supply drop's tracking effect is still active, and he has another 5 hours of his location being revealed to survive. A few minutes later, Seo-woon finally reaches the location he had marked at the center of the map. To his surprise, the area turns out to be a massive canyon. Looking into its depths, he cannot help but worry that a boss monster might emerge from below at any moment. Before he has time to investigate further, the red beacon activates once again. Only then does he realize that another 30 minutes have already passed. Unfortunately, the pursuers he thought he had shaken off soon arrive at the scene. The mage immediately launches a powerful flame spell in his direction. Just before the attack lands, Seo-woon activates Phantom Step, creating multiple clones that buy him enough time to escape. However, every clone is instantly consumed by the flames. Even Seo-woon himself gets caught in the blast and cries out in pain. The resulting explosion becomes enormous, destroying everything nearby. After the flames finally settle, the warrior scolds the mage, pointing out that they cannot even loot Seo-woon now because he has been blasted into the canyon. The mage admits that he probably should have held back a little. He then suggests leaving before the beacon attracts even more players. The warrior refuses because he knows Seo-woon possessed rare items. In fact, the warrior already owns a powerful rare weapon himself, the chainsword, a blade that can transform and extend like a whip, making it highly effective in long-range combat. Hearing that, the mage becomes annoyed because he still has not acquired any rare items of his own. Determined to recover Seo-woon's loot, he proposes using levitation magic to search the canyon below. The warrior immediately insists on coming along because neither of them knows how many valuable treasures Seo-woon might have left behind. Since he has no way to descend safely on his own, they tie a rope around the mage's waist, while the mage uses levitation magic to float downward. As they slowly descend, the mage casually warns the warrior that he might cut the rope if the warrior accidentally falls. The warrior panics and begs him not to do anything so reckless. The mage simply laughs and says they will see what happens. The warrior cannot believe his teammate is joking around when they are supposed to be working together. It turns out that levitation magic is considered extremely dangerous, because most mages cannot cast any other spells while using it, leaving them completely defenseless. Only highly skilled mages can perform other magic while floating. The descent continues until the mage announces that they are nearly at the bottom. The warrior immediately complains that it is easy for him to say because he is not the one dangling over a deadly drop. The mage reminds him that joining the descent was entirely his own decision. Suddenly, the rope goes slack. Terrified, the warrior grabs onto the canyon wall and starts yelling at the mage. However, when he turns around, he discovers something horrifying. His teammate has already been killed. The mage's upper body has been severed from the lower half, making it clear that whoever attacked him had no further use for him. The corpse falls into the water below. Only then does the warrior realize that there is actually a lake at the bottom of the canyon. He cannot believe they spent all that effort being careful when there was water that could have cushioned their fall the entire time. Without thinking much further, he jumps into the lake himself. The warrior surfaces from the water, feeling relieved, but then a terrifying realization strikes him. In all the confusion, he never stopped to ask who had killed his teammate. Before he can react, Seo-woon suddenly appears. The warrior is stunned because he thought Seo-woon died in the explosion earlier. Seo-woon immediately attacks with a bone-punching strike, but the warrior refuses to go down without a fight. Activating his chainsword, he extends the weapon in an attempt to rip Seo-woon's head off. Instead of retreating, Seo-woon grabs the weapon and allows the chain blade to wrap around his arm. The sharp edges cut deeply into his flesh, but he refuses to let go. Using his free hand, Seo-woon grabs the warrior by the head and coldly tells him that he should never have come after him if he was not prepared to die. Then he forces the man's head beneath the water and releases his inner energy. The burst of power shatters the warrior's head underwater, killing him instantly. The moment the team is eliminated, Seo-woon's kill count updates on the system. Afterward, he drags both loot chests out of the lake. Feeling how heavy they are, he quickly realizes that underwater combat is something he should avoid whenever possible. As he searches through the rewards, he finds a fire orb capable of unleashing a sealed fire spell wherever it is thrown. He also discovers Phoenix Strike, a Circle 4 technique that summons a phoenix which grows larger as it approaches its target. Seeing the high circle requirement, Seo-woon concludes that the mage was actually much stronger than he initially appeared. He is convinced that fighting the mage at full strength would have been a nightmare. Finally, he happily claims the chainsword for himself. Even though he lacks any swordsmanship skills at the moment, he knows a weapon of that caliber is far too valuable to pass up. Suddenly, Seo-woon senses someone approaching and immediately disappears before the incoming players can reach him. The group arrives at the location where he had just finished looting, only to discover that nothing valuable remains. While they are still looking around, Seo-woon silently appears behind them. Using a deadly punch, he instantly takes down one of the players. Thanks to the cloak of hiding, he is able to conceal himself perfectly and catch his enemies completely off guard. Before the team can properly react, Seo-woon finishes them off and claims their loot. Over the next several hours, his location continues appearing on the map because of the supply drop penalty. During that time, he hunts down numerous players, causing the overall player count to drop to 101. Later, the two elven archers he encountered earlier finally catch up to him. Unfortunately for them, the fight barely lasts any time at all before Seo-woon eliminates both of them and removes them from the game as well. Once the 6-hour tracking effect finally ends, Seo-woon takes out the 4th circle stone and the red cloud pill. Knowing that both items require a long period of recovery, he begins searching for the safest possible location to use them. After finding a suitable cave, he prepares himself for the process, fully aware that consuming both items will leave him vulnerable for at least 6 hours. Even so, he does not mind, because he has not properly rested in a long time. He starts with the elixir, and then proceeds to use the other item as well. After 6 exhausting hours pass, Seo-woon finally emerges from the cave. By now, his body has largely adapted to the effects of both items. It is already nighttime, which immediately works in his favor since darkness makes stealth much easier. Curious about the results, he checks his stats and notices that they have increased somewhat. However, the improvement still falls far short of the tremendous boost he once gained from absorbing Nam's energy. Despite that, Seo-woon is satisfied enough to continue hunting. The moment he notices players in the distance, he immediately goes after them. At this point, every enemy player has become nothing more than fuel for his growth. By the following morning, Seo-woon has spent the entire night hunting. When he finally checks the player count, he is shocked to discover that only 42 players remain alive on the 3rd day. Around that time, the system announces that the locations of both boss monsters and buff monsters will now be displayed to everyone. Purple markers indicate boss monsters, while red markers indicate buff monsters. Seeing that a buff monster is located relatively close to him, Seo-woon decides to investigate. Although he understands the risks involved, he is not willing to pass up the opportunity to gain a powerful buff. After traveling for a while, he finally reaches the marked location. The moment he sees the creature, however, he nearly soils himself. The buff monster turns out to be a gigantic snake of terrifying size. Just looking at it, Seo-woon estimates that it would take at least 6 full teams working together to defeat it. His first instinct is to turn around and leave immediately. Unfortunately, before he can escape, the snake opens its eyes and locks onto him. The giant serpent lets out a violent hiss, and Seo-woon becomes so frightened that he freezes where he stands. Unable to move, he watches as the massive creature slowly approaches him. Then, for some reason, the snake suddenly calms down. It quietly returns to its original position and resumes hibernating. Confused, Seo-woon starts wondering why it lost interest. His best guess is that the monster only attacks when someone enters a certain range. Realizing how lucky he was, Seo-woon decides not to test the theory any further. He slowly backs away while trying to convince himself that he is definitely not scared. Several hours pass without Seo-woon encountering a single player, which surprises him. He cannot believe that people are already playing so cautiously after only 3 days. While moving through the forest, he suddenly senses a presence nearby. Without hesitation, he unleashes a wind blade attack that tears through the trees ahead of him. Moments later, he hears the voice of a child coming from deeper in the woods and decides to investigate. To his surprise, he finds a frightened young boy hiding among the bushes. Seo-woon immediately apologizes for scaring him. The child looks battered and exhausted, with rough skin and numerous injuries covering his body. Seo-woon is in the middle of asking how old he is when another player suddenly appears from behind and swings a giant sword at him. Seo-woon effortlessly dodges the attack and responds with a palm strike that sends the attacker flying into a tree. The man crashes into it so hard that he begins coughing up blood. It immediately becomes clear to Seo-woon that the player deliberately partnered with a child to lower people's guard before ambushing them from behind. Seeing the numerous wounds on the boy's body, many of which had clearly been healed with healing scrolls, Seo-woon calls the man the lowest scum he has encountered in the game. The attacker admits that Seo-woon is stronger than him, but arrogantly claims that killing Seo-woon will make him just as powerful. He then throws out a flame orb, a powerful item that detonates on contact. The instant it reaches Seo-woon, a massive explosion erupts. Before the smoke even clears, The player is already bragging about how effective the item is. His confidence vanishes the moment Seo-woon's voice emerges from the smoke. Seo-woon mocks him for relying on items to compensate for his weakness. Thanks to his extremely high magic resistance, the Circle 3 spell barely affects him. The player freezes in terror because he cannot believe someone just tanked such an attack head-on. Before he can continue talking, Seo-woon grabs him and smashes his head against a tree. Furious over what the man did to the child, Seo-woon pushes his fingers into the man's eye sockets and crushes his head against the trunk. Watching the gruesome scene, the boy immediately panics and curls up in fear, convinced that Seo-woon will kill him next. Instead, Seo-woon calmly asks for his name. The boy replies that his name is Lyle. Hearing this, Seo-woon feels terrible that someone so young ended up trapped in the game. He asks if this is Lyle's first game, and the boy confirms that it is. According to him, he was simply on his way home when he was suddenly transported into the game world. Seo-woon tells him that there is no way he can leave him in his current state. He takes out a bag of jerky from his storage and hands it to the boy. On top of that, he gives him a 4th circle stone. Seo-woon explains that he is already capable of using 4th circle magic, so he no longer needs it. He believes the item should be enough to help Lyle survive since there do not seem to be many powerful players left. As he prepares to leave, Seo-woon encourages the boy, telling him that if he manages to survive, he might stumble across a great opportunity. Tears of gratitude stream down Lyle's face as he bows repeatedly and thanks Seo-woon for saving him. Deep down, Seo-woon knows he is not much different from Lyle. Only 2 months ago, he had been just as helpless until he met Dutch. He understands that without the old man's guidance, he probably would have been eliminated very early on. Not long afterward, Seo-woon receives a system notification stating that the duo of Hayami, Ren, and Drift has withdrawn from fighting the boss monster. The moment he sees the name Ren, he recognizes him as the high school student he noticed in the lobby. Since they have just come out of a major battle, Seo-woon assumes they must be exhausted. He immediately decides that ambushing them before they recover would be the smartest move. Following the map toward the boss area, he soon discovers that the boss monster has already been defeated. However, Ren and Drift are not alone. Several other players are gathered there, arguing over some agreement they apparently made before the battle. One warrior complains that their deal was made before the boss died and accuses Drift of stealing the final hit. Drift becomes irritated and tells everyone to stop whining and attack him if they have a problem. Ren, hidden beneath a hood, also criticizes the group and says they have no sense of loyalty. At that moment, a woman dressed in tribal clothing steps forward. She tells Ren not to insult the people who fought alongside him and points out that the only thing that matters now is the distribution of the boss rewards. She asks whether Ren intends to share them. Ren immediately refuses, arguing that there are not enough rewards to divide among everyone. Hearing that, the woman openly declares war and announces that she will kill them all and take the rewards herself. Hidden nearby, Seo-woon watches the entire argument unfold and finds it entertaining enough that he wishes he had popcorn. Suddenly, Ren shouts for someone to come out. At first, Seo-woon assumes he is talking to someone else, but then Ren specifically calls out his name. Ren claims he knows Seo-woon is nearby and says there is no point hiding. Seo-woon is amazed by how shameless the guy is. Ren then pulls out a glowing bag and claims it contains the boss monster's heart. He loudly announces that Seo-woon promised to help them if they handed over the heart, and even threatens to give it away if Seo-woon does not reveal himself. Seo-woon remains completely still because he knows Ren is only using his name as a bluff to manipulate the other players. Seeing the glowing bag, Seo-woon immediately realizes what is happening. Since everyone has probably seen his name on the kill feed, Ren is exploiting his reputation to intimidate the others. Ren casually places the bag on the ground and announces that Seo-woon can kill the other players however he wants. The gathered players are stunned to see such a valuable reward being left unattended, but the tribal woman quickly tells her allies to stay calm and reminds them that the rewards will be shared evenly. Before anyone can react, Ren and Drift suddenly take off running. The remaining players immediately become distracted by the bag and start arguing over its contents. The woman is the first to recover and begins chasing after Ren. Seeing the complete chaos, Seo-woon decides to enjoy the show a little longer. As Ren and Drift race through the forest, Drift asks how much longer they are going to keep running because fleeing is not exactly his specialty. He admits that he is already itching for a fight. Ren agrees and finally decides to get serious. He reveals that the woman and several other players are already pursuing them and tells Drift to prepare for the counterattack formation they discussed earlier. Drift is thrilled because he has been waiting for an opportunity to fight. Moments later, Ren leaps onto a tree branch and comes to a stop. He tells Drift to focus on dealing with the troublesome woman while he handles everyone else. Without wasting another second, Ren unleashes a devastating lightning spell toward the pursuing group. Several players are struck directly and scream in agony. Even the tribal woman is shocked by the sheer power of the attack. While she takes cover behind a tree, Drift charges toward her and swings his massive weapon. She quickly blocks the strike with an ice barrier and then leaps away before the next attack can land. As the battle continues, Drift notices frost rapidly spreading across his hammer. Annoyed, he complains that her freezing techniques are incredibly troublesome to deal with. Drift manages to break free from the freezing effect and immediately leaps toward the tribal woman. However, she responds with a far more advanced ice technique that shatters several of his fingers. Seeing that Drift is about to be defeated, Ren quickly launches a lightning spell at her. To his shock, the woman redirects the electricity straight into the ground. She proudly explains that by coating her body with inner energy and carefully controlling the flow of chi, she can temporarily reduce damage and redirect lightning attacks. Although such a technique requires extremely advanced control, she considers it nothing special because she has already mastered it. While the two continue exchanging words, Drift is still groaning in pain nearby. The woman confidently tells Ren that she will personally kill him because she has already figured out all of his tricks. She then rushes toward him. Ren fires another lightning attack, but she calmly redirects it into a nearby tree as well. Ren is completely stunned because he has never seen anyone neutralize magic in such a manner. Realizing that ranged combat is no longer effective, he concludes that the battle will have to be settled through close combat. Reaching into his storage, he pulls out a sword and swings it at her. Although she blocks the strike, she is genuinely surprised that a mage is also capable of using martial arts. Ren pushes her back, but just then she receives a notification informing her that her teammate has been killed by Seo-woon. The shocking news leaves her distracted for a brief moment, and that opening is all Ren needs. He drives his sword into her body, forcing her to jump backward while clutching her wound. Ren coldly tells her to accept her fate because her journey has already come to an end. The woman starts mentioning that her ally was defeated by Seo-woon, but before she can finish her sentence, an arrow suddenly pierces straight through her head and kills her instantly. The force behind the arrow is so tremendous that it continues traveling and even punches through Drift's armored arm. Both Ren and Drift are left completely stunned. Moments later, Seo-woon finally steps out from hiding and sarcastically comments that Ren certainly had a lot of nerve using his name the way he did. Ren immediately panics when he realizes that the infamous Seo-woon is standing right in front of him. Seo-woon asks if he really believed there would be no consequences for dragging his name into the situation. Keeping his bow aimed directly at Ren, Seo-woon demands that he hand over the ant's heart. Ren quickly claims that he already gave it away as part of the decoy earlier. Before he can continue the lie, Seo-woon fires an arrow that tears through the side of his face. He tells Ren not to insult his intelligence, because he already figured out that the glowing bag was nothing more than an enchanted, empty sack. Seo-woon then makes it clear that he has no intention of wasting time arguing. If necessary, he will simply kill Ren and Drift and search their loot himself. Unfortunately, Drift chooses exactly the wrong moment to overestimate himself. He charges forward and declares that Seo-woon should never underestimate a warrior of Thistle. He mocks Seo-woon as nothing more than an archer. However, Seo-woon casually dodges his attack and retaliates with a strike so devastating that Drift's head is torn clean off his neck. Watching the body fall, Seo-woon cannot help but wonder how someone so weak managed to talk so confidently. Seeing this, Ren completely loses his composure. Stuttering nervously, he asks Seo-woon how many times he has participated in the game. Seo-woon calmly replies that this is only his second time. For some reason, hearing that makes Ren assume Seo-woon is still inexperienced. He suddenly regains his confidence and yells at Seo-woon for acting arrogant after only 2 games. Ren immediately unleashes a powerful lightning attack, but before the spell can even come close to reaching its target, Seo-woon fires an arrow straight through his head. With that, both Ren and Drift are eliminated. Interestingly, Seo-woon absorbs more inner energy from Ren's remains than he did from Drift's. He originally assumed Ren was merely a mage, but now suspects that he also possessed some martial arts training. Afterward, Seo-woon begins sorting through their loot. While doing so, he reflects on how unlikely it is that he will encounter another participant from his own world. Suddenly, he discovers something extraordinary inside Ren's chest, a golden weapon box. The item is an incredibly rare drop that only appears from specific monsters, and opening it grants a random special weapon. Seo-woon is completely amazed and immediately considers it one of the best rewards he has seen so far. Without hesitation, he opens it. As golden light pours out, his expectations soar. He imagines obtaining an incredible sword or perhaps a legendary bow. Unfortunately, his excitement vanishes when he sees the reward. The item is called Selfish Hamet. At first glance, it looks like nothing more than a strange ball. Disappointed, Seo-woon assumes he got unlucky and prepares to throw it into his subspace. However, the item suddenly starts talking. The ball transforms into its true form and introduces itself as the weapon spirit Elsius Hamet. Seo-woon remains completely unimpressed and casually asks whether Hamet plans to fight his battles for him. Hamet quickly clarifies that he is actually a weapon capable of transforming into any form his owner desires. Deep down, Hamet is baffled because most people would be screaming with joy after obtaining him. Curious, Hamet asks what type of weapon Seo-woon normally uses and promises to become the ultimate version of it. Seo-woon casually replies that he does not really use weapons. From that answer, Hamet concludes that Seo-woon specializes in hand-to-hand combat and transforms into a powerful gauntlet. He proudly claims that the gauntlet can shatter anything. Unfortunately for him, Seo-woon immediately rejects it because it is too heavy and would interfere with drawing his bow. Hamet reluctantly adjusts himself and transforms into a lighter, more flexible dark gauntlet designed for mobility. Even then, Seo-woon is still dissatisfied. Frustrated, Hammett demands to know why his new master is being so picky. After thinking for a moment, Seo-woon decides that Hammett would be most useful as an extremely durable piece of cloth that he can use however he wants. Hammett is horrified that someone would ask a legendary weapon spirit to become a simple rag. Seo-woon calmly suggests returning him to storage if he has a problem with it. Left with no choice, Hammett transforms into a sleeve-like cloth. Surprisingly, Seo-woon is delighted with the result, while Hammett internally believes he deserves much better. Seo-woon wraps the cloth around his hand and tells Hammett to behave if they want to get along. Grumbling, Hammett accepts his fate and reveals that transforming into weapons is not his only ability. To Seo-woon's surprise, a roulette wheel suddenly appears before him. Hammett explains that his owner can spin the wheel once per day and cast one spell from the result, regardless of circle requirements. Some of the spells are so powerful that they can completely change the outcome of a battle. As an example, Hammett mentions a revival spell. Seo-woon is genuinely shocked to learn that such a spell exists, especially one capable of bringing someone back to life after death. Hammett quickly reminds him that obtaining such a spell depends entirely on luck. Curious, Seo-woon asks whether he can spin the roulette immediately, and Hammett confirms that he can. However, before he gets the chance, Hammett suddenly becomes serious. He warns Seo-woon that he senses an overwhelming killing intent directed toward him. Seo-woon assumes another survivor has tracked him down but cannot sense any chi nearby. When he asks Hammett if he can identify the direction, Hammett admits he cannot pinpoint the source, but insists that his instincts are never wrong. Preparing for the possibility of an attack, Seo-woon takes out the airboard he looted from the mage earlier. The item is apparently a transportation tool commonly used by high-level mages and witches. Hammett immediately complains that this is hardly the time for a casual conversation. Meanwhile, Seo-woon decides it may be smarter to intentionally lower his guard and lure the hidden enemy into revealing themselves. Hammett understands the logic, but points out that the risk is enormous. Seo-woon is shocked to discover that Hammett can read his thoughts. The weapon spirit explains that since they are now bound together, their consciousness is partially connected. Just as Seo-woon prepares to board the airboard, a coordinated barrage of arrows and fireballs suddenly crashes into him. The attack sends him flying and he crashes painfully onto the ground. Moments later, an archer emerges from hiding while a mage appears from the opposite direction. The mage immediately notices something important: the kill feed has not appeared. She warns her partner that Seo-woon must have survived and urges him to finish the job quickly. The archer tells her to activate detection magic in case Seo-woon has hidden allies nearby. Confident that Seo-woon is dying, the archer approaches and prepares to shoot him through the head. To his horror, Seo-woon suddenly raises his arm and catches the arrow with his bare hand. The archer freezes in disbelief. Seo-woon then crushes the arrow effortlessly in his grip and casually compliments Hammett on being surprisingly durable. Terrified, the archer retreats while shouting at the mage to bombard Seo-woon with everything she has. Instead of waiting, Seo-woon instantly charges forward and pulls out the chainsword. Before the archer can even react, the transformed blade slices through his neck. As his life fades away, the only thing he can think about is whether Seo-woon somehow shot him from a distance. Witnessing the effortless kill, the mage immediately abandons the fight. She jumps onto a broom and flies away as fast as possible. Seo-woon watches in amazement because it is his first time seeing someone escape using a broom. Hammett casually explains that this is how high-level witches usually travel, and asks whether Seo-woon plans to pursue her. Seo-woon simply shrugs and replies that he has no interest in chasing her since she does not seem particularly strong anyway. After finishing his looting, Seo-woon confidently assumes that the game will end within the next 2 days, because so few players remain. Unfortunately, that prediction turns out to be completely wrong. The game drags on all the way to day 20, and during that entire period, the player count does not decrease by even a single person. After spending days sitting in trees and nearly dying from boredom, Seo-woon finally pulls out the airboard again. Hammett immediately asks if he is heading out on another patrol. Seo-woon replies that he has no choice because everyone is hiding. If he wants to find any opponents, he has to hunt them down personally. He recalls that up until day 5, finding players had been relatively easy, but afterward, it became nearly impossible. For the last 10 days, he has been actively searching every corner of the shrinking map and still has not managed to locate anyone. Frustrated, Seo-woon asks Hammett whether he can sense anything at all, because tracking people down has become exhausting. Hammett admits that he cannot detect anything, and that everything feels just as quiet as it did the day before. Seo-woon immediately starts mocking him, saying he thought he had obtained a useful radar when he got Hammett, but it turns out the weapon spirit is completely useless. Hammett defends himself by explaining that unless someone releases killing intent or bloodlust, there is nothing he can sense. Even though the playable area has shrunk to only 1/6 of its original size, there are still countless places where players can hide. Hammett advises Seo-woon to stop desperately searching, because eventually, the remaining players will have no choice but to reveal themselves. Seo-woon disagrees and tells Hammett to think about the situation more carefully. He points out that the kill feed is practically filled with his name. If the remaining survivors decide to unite against him, he could easily end up facing an 11 versus 1 battle. To prevent that from happening, he believes he must reduce the number of survivors before they can coordinate. Hearing this, Hammett suggests an entirely different approach. Instead of wasting time hunting players, he should go after Black Argon, the buff monster. Seo-woon immediately realizes what Hammett is talking about and nearly loses his mind. He reminds Hammett that Black Argon is the gigantic snake, and there is absolutely no way he can defeat that thing alone. Hammett remains confident and insists that Seo-woon is more than capable of taking it down. Seo-woon repeatedly questions whether Hammett genuinely believes he can beat the monster, and each time Hammett confidently reassures him that victory is possible. Not long afterward, Seo-woon discovers that several players are already battling the giant snake. Judging from the situation, they have spent a tremendous amount of effort weakening it and are close to finishing it off. Suddenly, the players detect Seo-woon approaching and immediately begin to panic. They know exactly who he is and realize that if he reaches the battlefield first, all of their hard work could be stolen. Hammett informs Seo-woon that the player's mana detection has already picked up his presence, but Seo-woon calmly replies that he knows. As he closes in, he remarks that they are probably panicking now that they know he is nearby. When he finally arrives, he notices something surprising. All of the remaining players appear to be gathered around the snake. Looking at the situation, Seo-woon cannot help wondering why he always seems to end up getting ganged up on. Without hesitation, Seo-woon pulls out his bow. One of the players is focused entirely on attacking the snake, when Seo-woon suddenly fires a lightning-infused arrow into his back. The attack shocks the man and leaves him completely vulnerable, allowing the giant snake to finish him off. The other players immediately panic because they know Seo-woon is attacking, but they cannot determine where the shot came from. One of them quickly tells the others that they need to abandon the hunt for now, because if they keep focusing on the monster, Seo-woon will wipe them out one by one. Moments later, an arrow flies towards Seo-woon, forcing him to relocate. The enemy commander orders the mages to cast detection spells and prioritize eliminating Seo-woon above all else. Realizing that someone among them is actually thinking clearly, Seo-woon decides he needs to end the situation before they can organize properly. Drawing his bow to its absolute limit, he pours all of his remaining energy into a single attack. Then he fires. The arrow streaks through the battlefield and slams directly into the giant snake's head. Lightning erupts throughout its body, draining the last sliver of health it had left. The players stare in disbelief as the monster collapses. They immediately begin asking which team received the buff, only to learn that Seo-woon was credited with the kill. As a result, his stats increase by 30% for the next 10 days. Despite this revelation, the surviving players refuse to retreat. Convinced that a 30% boost is not enough to make him unbeatable, they decide to attack him all at once. Seo-woon leaps down from the treetops and charges directly into battle. A fierce fight erupts between him and the remaining players. His opening attack is blocked, allowing him to realize that their defensive barriers are the biggest obstacle. Without wasting time, he rushes one of the mages and kills him with a single punch. Just like that, Seo-woon claims the first kill of the battle and begins dismantling the group from the inside. With the remaining players swarming him from every direction, Seo-woon removes the cloak of hiding since it is no longer useful in a direct battle. He quickly notices that the group is being unusually cautious. None of them want to make the first move until they fully understand the extent of his strength. After observing them for a moment, Seo-woon decides that the mage who lost his barrier should be his first target. Without hesitation, he leaps into the air and charges straight toward the mage. The moment the group's leader realizes what he is doing, he shouts for everyone to protect the mage at all costs. The others reluctantly agree, reminding him that they are only following his orders because they share a common enemy. Seo-woon is genuinely surprised to see so many players working together so effectively, something completely out of character for the participants he has encountered so far. Before he can reach the mage, they form a defensive wall around him. Unfortunately for them, brute force is still on Seo-woon's side. He crashes through their formation, shattering a warrior's shield in the process. Before he can capitalize on the opening, however, a martial artist attacks him from behind. Seo-woon barely avoids getting sliced apart because the opponent is wielding a flexible sword capable of extending unexpectedly. Realizing he cannot simply overpower everyone at once, Seo-woon switches to a counter-attacking approach and forces the swordsman backward. Even then, he cannot help but admire how well the group is coordinating their attacks. Soon, Seo-woon finds himself trapped between two dangerous warriors. Just as he realizes they are about to cut him down, he orders Hammett to transform into whatever shape he is imagining. Instantly understanding his intention, Hammett changes into a shield. The shield blocks most of the incoming attack, although Seo-woon's face still ends up getting sliced. Even so, the brief opening is enough. Seo-woon drives a devastating punch into one of the warriors, shattering the man's head and killing him instantly. With another enemy down, he estimates that only 8 opponents remain. However, one of the mages suddenly speaks up and reveals that they have specifically prepared for someone like him. A blonde mage confidently announces that she has been waiting for this exact opportunity. Before Seowon can react, she casts a spell on him. The moment it lands, he realizes how serious the situation has become. It is a powerful debuff that reduces all of his stats by 40% for 30 minutes. Seowon immediately regrets not targeting her first. Seeing the debuff take effect, the remaining players gain confidence. Believing that Seowon has finally become vulnerable, they launch a coordinated assault. Seowon refuses to sit still and die. He counters by kicking one of the warriors in the chest, but the man manages to block it. That alone confirms that the debuff is working exactly as intended. Encouraged by this, the group presses forward even harder. Seowon attempts to escape by jumping into the air, only to be struck by a massive flame spell that slams him back into the ground. He quickly realizes that the only reason he survived the attack is because the 30% buff from the giant snake is partially offsetting the 40% debuff. Without the snake's blessing, the spell would have killed him instantly. At that moment, Seowon concludes that the blonde mage must die first if he wants any chance of winning. The players praise him for surviving the devastating attack, but they have no intention of slowing down. Switching to close combat, they begin tightening the pressure around him. Seowon realizes that the group's leader is becoming a major problem, and regrets not eliminating him with a surprise attack earlier. As the battle grows more intense, he suddenly notices Lyle standing nearby. Before he can think much about it, another mage launches a powerful spell that knocks him flat on his back. The enemies immediately capitalize on the opportunity and begin restraining him, trying to keep him from escaping. Just as Seowon starts wondering whether this might be the end, a stone-based attack erupts from below and smashes into him, pinning him even harder. The close combat fighters rush in, convinced they are about to finish him. Then everything changes. Out of nowhere, Lyle attacks the blonde mage with a wind blade and kills her instantly. The moment she dies, the debuff placed on Seowon disappears. Freed from the curse, he immediately dodges the incoming finishing strike and retaliates with terrifying force. His fist punches straight through the leader's chest, leaving a massive hole behind. The man stares at the wound in disbelief, because Seowon should not have been capable of such strength moments earlier. As Seowon gets back to his feet, he realizes it was Lyle who saved him. Knowing that his own death is inevitable, Lyle simply tells Seowon to win the game. Tragically, one of the surviving players stabs the boy in the back, killing him on the spot. The sight of Lyle's death triggers something inside Seowon. Although he had only given the boy a few items and some guidance, he never expected to care so much about what happened to him. Yet, seeing a child murdered without hesitation fills him with overwhelming rage. A storm of emotions floods his mind as he charges into the remaining players. Questions, anger, and frustration consume him completely. Before he even realizes what is happening, he has slaughtered everyone on the battlefield. He only returns to his senses when a congratulatory message suddenly appears before him, informing him that he has won the game. Seowon is stunned that he actually emerged victorious. However, his first thought is not the victory itself, but the enormous amount of chi scattered across the battlefield. He immediately tries to absorb the energy and collect the loot chests, but the system stops him. The game has already ended. Instead, he receives his rewards. He earns 240 coins and receives additional rewards for achieving the highest number of kills. On top of that, he is granted another 100 bonus coins. Because he has reached the top 5 inches 2 consecutive games, he receives an extra 15 coins as well. Altogether, Seowon is shocked to discover that he has earned 355 coins. The amount completely dwarfs the 140 coins he earned during the first game. Hammett immediately starts praising himself and claims that Seowon only won because of him. Seowon admits that Hammett was useful, but tells him that he was still fairly average overall. Learning that Hammett normally costs 100 coins to purchase, the weapon spirit desperately tries to convince Seowon to buy him permanently. Seowon refuses, arguing that Hammett is overpriced and that other items, such as the Cloak of Hiding for 70 coins, seem far more practical. He is even more interested in trying another golden weapon box. At that moment, the system reminds him that top 5 players are allowed to spin the reward roulette. Since he finished in first place, he is granted 3 spins instead of 1. Hoping for something valuable, Seowon begins his first spin. Unfortunately, he once again lands on Escrow's necklace. While it is not the reward he wanted, he consoles himself by remembering that it still has value. During the second spin, Hammett becomes ecstatic because Seowon lands on him. The weapon spirit celebrates wildly since he no longer has to return to the box. Seowon is far less excited because he had hoped for another golden weapon box, but he admits that saving 100 coins is not a bad outcome. On the final spin, he obtains a fragmented secret tome worth 60 coins. Curious about the item, he wonders how many fragments he will need before it becomes complete. After carefully reviewing all of his options, Seowon spends his coins on a 4th circle stone, an Iceland spellbook, a vital essence pill, Tokar's ring, and another Cloak of Hiding. Even after all those purchases, he still has 49 coins remaining, which he decides to save for future games. Once his shopping is complete, the system wishes him luck in the next round, and transports him back to reality. Seowoon reappears in the same park where he vanished 20 days earlier. To his horror, 2 hikers are nearby and immediately spot him. The sight of a blood-covered man suddenly appearing in front of them understandably disgusts and alarms them. Thinking quickly, Seowoon lies and claims that the blood is fake because a movie is being filmed in the area. Deep down, however, he is already annoyed. If this keeps happening every time he returns from a game, dealing with confused witnesses is going to become a serious headache. After returning to reality, Seowoon heads straight home. Even though he has only participated in 2 games so far, he can already feel how dramatically stronger he has become. The first thing he does is take off his blood-soaked jersey and throw it into the trash. He pauses for a moment to mourn its loss because it was his favorite one. Not wanting to waste any time, Seowoon sits down in the lotus position and takes out the 4th circle stone. 6 hours later, after using both the 4th circle stone and the red cloud pill, his room once again feels like a furnace. When he finally stands up, he feels completely refreshed and energized. He can sense that both his mana and base stats have improved significantly, but he decides to verify it for himself. Opening his status window, he is stunned by the increase in both his inner energy and mana. He can hardly believe how much stronger he has become after only 2 games, and immediately starts imagining how powerful he might become after future rounds. Just as he begins thinking about getting something to eat, Hammett suddenly starts shouting at him, demanding to know how long Seowoon plans to ignore him. With a sigh, Seowoon pulls him out of storage and tells him to keep his voice down. Hammett complains about being locked away and insists that weapons like him are incredibly rare. Seowoon simply ignores the bragging and instead asks the voice assistant on his phone to locate nearby Chinese restaurants. Hearing the phone speak back, Hammett is completely shocked. Seowoon casually explains that in his world, there are countless tools capable of talking, making Hammett far less impressive than he thinks. The comment completely crushes Hammett's pride. Hammett argues that his value comes from being an incredible weapon, not from his ability to talk. Seowoon then points out another problem. Even if Hammett transformed into a sword, carrying one around in modern society would require permits and attract attention. This leaves him wondering what form Hammett should take in everyday life. Hammett suggests turning back into the cloth sleeve he used during the game, but Seowoon immediately rejects the idea because people would think he was weird for walking around with cloth wrapped around his hand. Trying to be helpful, Hammett transforms into a robe and asks for his opinion. Unfortunately, Seowoon dislikes that even more. Just as Seowoon is about to throw him back into storage, Hammett suddenly changes into a necklace. This finally earns approval. Seowoon tells him that a necklace is something he can actually work with, and Hammett lets out a relieved sigh. As a bonus, the necklace form still allows him to function as a detector for killing intent. Right then, Seowoon's food delivery arrives. A short while later, he finishes eating and feels genuinely satisfied because he has spent so much time surviving on dried meat inside the game. Hammett curiously asks whether the food was good, only for Seowoon to remind him that he cannot eat, making the question rather pointless. Hammett claims he is simply curious because his master is such a heartless person. After finishing his meal, Seowoon gets ready to leave. When Hammett asks where they are going, Seowoon points out that Hammett is coming along anyway, so there is no reason to explain. Their destination turns out to be the internet cafe where Seowoon used to spend much of his time gaming. The attendant is surprised to see him after such a long absence and asks whether something happened. Seowoon casually claims that he has been busy preparing for school and only came by to relax. The attendant informs him that a Loyal Ground tournament will be held the following week and asks if he wants to participate. Seowoon declines, saying that he has found a much more interesting game and has completely lost interest in Loyal Ground. Once seated at a computer, Hammett asks what Loyal Ground even is. Seowoon jokingly describes it as a low-budget version of Cloyd Survival. After experiencing the real thing, he knows no ordinary game can satisfy him anymore. The real reason he came to the cafe is because he wants to investigate the possibility of finding other players from the real world. Specifically, he is curious about Ren and whether people like him have formed connections outside the game. Based on what he has learned so far, it seems that survivors communicate through the dark web. Hoping to find answers, Seowoon begins searching. Eventually, he comes across a suspicious link that leads him to something called the Survivor's Message Board. The moment he clicks it, a large message appears on the screen asking a simple question: "Are you a survivor?" Feeling a little nervous, Seowoon clicks yes while wondering what he has gotten himself into. To his surprise, the site's design closely resembles the interface used inside Cloyd Survival. This immediately convinces him that whoever created it must be a veteran player. A chat window soon appears and aggressively warns him to leave if he is simply fooling around. Seowoon quickly realizes that he is speaking with some sort of automated system designed to filter out imposters and curious outsiders. Thinking there might be a secret code involved, he asks whether there is a password. Instead of answering, the bot tells him to leave and casually mentions mentions that it knows his location. The warning catches Seo-woon off guard. The chatbot explains that he should not even be using the dark web if he lacks the ability to protect himself. Fascinated by the level of access hackers seem to possess, Seo-woon ignores the warning. The bot asks whether he is not afraid. Seo-woon replies that he is more annoyed than scared because he still cannot gain access. The chatbot eventually tells him that if he truly is a survivor, he needs to prove it. Unsure what that means, Seo-woon waits for further instructions. A puzzle suddenly appears on the screen. The moment he sees the pieces, he immediately recognizes the image. It depicts the giant statue from inside the game. Seo-woon is both relieved and annoyed because he cannot believe the test is this simple. After solving the puzzle, the system instantly verifies his identity and welcomes him to the site. The chat then asks how many times he has participated in the game. Seo-woon refuses to answer, explaining that the information feels too personal. Surprisingly, the chatbot agrees and does not press the issue. Instead, it informs him that login credentials have been prepared for him and that the site's elite hackers will provide protection around the clock. Not wanting to forget them, Seo-woon quickly saves the ID and password so he can access the network again in the future. After successfully logging into the site, Seo-woon begins exploring the forums to figure out where to start. He decides to check the beginner tips section first. The very first tip immediately grabs his attention. It explains that governments around the world are desperately trying to bring ability users under control and warns players never to reveal their abilities in public under any circumstances. The second tip is even more alarming. Seo-woon learns that he is far from being the only player and that the number of participants is increasing every day. Because of that, players are warned not to get carried away thinking they are special. The guide also reveals that government-backed organizations actively hunt beginner players and are willing to use any means necessary to prevent ability users from creating chaos. Reading this, Seo-woon nearly panics because it sounds less like advice and more like a direct threat. As he continues reading, he discovers another important piece of information. Players can sell items obtained from the game through broker sites and wealthy buyers on the dark web. There are entire marketplaces dedicated to converting game items into real-world cash. Realizing this, Seo-woon begins to see the possibility of earning a stable income from the game. Curious about the value of his own items, he heads to the market section and starts browsing. While scrolling through listings, he notices countless items he has never even encountered before. One listing catches his eye immediately, a witch's elixir being offered for 20 million won with a limited time purchase request. Just when he thinks the prices cannot get any crazier, he discovers an item with bids reaching 100 million won. To his disbelief, the item is a failed ointment from the court empire that guarantees hair growth wherever it is applied. Seo-woon mentally notes that information for the future because it might prove useful someday. As he continues browsing, he finally understands why players are so obsessed with run counts. The forums are filled with bodyguard requests, where players with more than 10 runs earn millions every month, while players with over 30 runs can practically charge whatever they want. In this community, a higher run count translates directly into greater status and influence. While surfing through the site, Seo-woon suddenly stumbles upon an article discussing a 13th run hybrid mage who was defeated by a second run player. Curious, he checks the author's name and immediately realizes it was written by Ren, the high school mage. The comments below are filled with people refusing to believe the story and mocking Seo-woon instead. Seeing that Ren is active online, Seo-woon decides to message him directly. Ren quickly replies and asks whether it is actually true that Seo-woon only has 2 runs. When Seo-woon confirms it, Ren is stunned. Seo-woon then asks whether being on his second run is really such a big deal. Ren explains that it absolutely is because players are not supposed to become that strong so quickly. In fact, Ren originally assumed Seo-woon was a fixed player. Hearing a term he has never encountered before, Seo-woon asks what a fixed player is. The moment he asks, Ren immediately concludes that Seo-woon is genuinely a beginner. He explains that everyone starts as a free player, but certain hidden conditions allow them to rank up into fixed players. Apparently, the tutorial match only occurs once for free players, though most participants never realize it. Ren admits that it took him until his 13th run to figure this out. After explaining, Ren asks for Seo-woon's contact information. He insists that Seo-woon still has a lot to learn and claims he can teach him plenty. Naturally, Seo-woon becomes suspicious and wonders whether Ren is simply looking for a chance to settle their score in real life. He tells Ren that he cannot trust someone who asks so directly. Ren assures him that he will not regret it because he is close to becoming a fixed player himself, meaning he will eventually need a fixed team anyway. Seo-woon remains confused about what a fixed team actually is, so Ren suggests meeting in person. After some consideration, Seo-woon agrees and picks a location. Ren promises to arrive within an hour. As Seo-woon leaves the internet cafe, he cannot stop wondering whether meeting Ren is a good idea. An hour later, he reaches the agreed location and waits. Before long, a motorcycle roars into the area. The engine is so loud that everyone nearby assumes the rider is trying to show off. Since the rider is wearing a helmet, nobody can identify him. Watching from a distance, Seo-woon assumes he is just some rich kid with too much confidence. Then the rider suddenly turns toward him. For a brief moment, Seo-woon wonders whether he accidentally stared too long. The mystery is solved when the rider removes his helmet, and reveals himself to be Ren. Ren introduces himself as the high school mage from the game. Seo-woon is genuinely caught off guard because this is the first time he has met someone he personally killed inside the game. Even so, he cannot ignore one important fact: the guy has an incredibly punchable face. The two eventually settle into a cafe and begin talking. Seo-woon immediately asks why Ren wanted a face-to-face meeting. Ren gets straight to the point and says that he wants to join Seo-woon's team. Seo-woon reminds him that he already mentioned this online, but he still does not understand what it actually means. Ren begins explaining that both of them are currently free players. Because he is speaking loudly, Seo-woon quickly tells him to lower his voice before someone overhears them. Ren casually dismisses the concern and points to a pendant he is wearing. According to him, the item prevents anyone except them from hearing the conversation. Seo-woon is amazed and assumes Ren brought the item back from the game. However, Ren reveals that it was crafted in the real world by a player who specialized in alchemy. Once again, Ren is reminded of just how inexperienced Seo-woon really is. Ren then asks about Seo-woon's results so far. Seo-woon reveals that he placed second in his first run and first in his second run. Ren is absolutely blown away by the revelation. He admits that he has only ever heard stories about players achieving consecutive top placements and never expected to meet one personally. Seo-woon downplays it by claiming he was simply lucky. Ren laughs and reveals that he has only managed to reach the top 5 once and has nearly retired several times. Confused, Seo-woon asks what retirement means. Ren explains that retirement is simply another word for elimination. If a player fails to meet the survival conditions, they lose access to the game forever. Deciding to leave that topic aside, Ren returns to the main reason for the meeting. He asks again about forming a team. Seo-woon wonders whether teams can only be created by fixed players, but Ren explains that fixed players can form permanent parties of up to 8 members. These teams can enter the same game together regardless of where the members live in the real world. Seo-woon asks whether Ren is essentially proposing that they play together in future games. Ren confirms that this is exactly what he wants. After spending a long time discussing the details, the two eventually decide to end the meeting and call it a day. On his way home, Hammett brings up something that has been bothering him. He reminds Seo-woon that Ren was once his enemy and finds it strange that he is suddenly willing to become teammates. Seo-woon simply shrugs and replies that everything happened inside a game, so he has no reason to hold a grudge. More importantly, he believes reliable teammates who can follow instructions are worth having. Hammett continues arguing that trusting Ren could be a mistake, but Seo-woon remains firm. In his opinion, everything carries risk, and there is no way to move forward without taking some. Suddenly, Hammett senses killing intent directed toward them. He immediately warns Seo-woon that 3 people are watching him and asks whether he should transform into a weapon so they can deal with the problem quickly. Seo-woon calmly refuses. The 3 attackers are so inexperienced that they cannot even conceal their presence properly. After pinpointing all of their locations, Seo-woon confidently calls them out and tells them to stop hiding. Realizing they've been discovered, the trio steps out and starts acting tough. They warn Seo-woon not to be arrogant because he has no idea what they are capable of. Unimpressed, Seo-woon simply asks what business they have with him. The bald leader cannot believe how calm and confident Seo-woon is, so he orders him to cooperate if he wants to avoid getting hurt. After hearing them talk, Seo-woon immediately recognizes them as the beginner hunters mentioned on the forums, people who specialize in targeting inexperienced players. Hammett once again offers to transform into a weapon, but Seo-woon dismisses the idea, saying they are not even worth the effort. Instead, he releases a powerful aura that instantly fills the trio with fear. He tells them that he is willing to let them leave peacefully if they turn around and walk away right now. The leader tries a different approach and claims they are working for the government. He tells Seo-woon that ability users like him are being classified as terrorists, and that showing supernatural abilities in residential areas is already considered a crime. According to him, Seo-woon should cooperate voluntarily before things get worse. Seo-woon is completely unconvinced. He calmly replies that if they leave him alone, he has no intention of causing trouble. However, if they truly represent the government, they should come back with an official warrant instead of trying to intimidate him. One of the men suddenly loses patience and attacks from behind. Seo-woon reacts instantly. He spins around so quickly that his fist reaches the attacker's face before stopping at the last possible moment. The message is clear. He could have knocked the man out with ease if he wanted to. Seo-woon then reminds them that they were the first ones to draw weapons. At that moment, the leader realizes that his teammate has made a huge mistake and immediately scolds him for acting recklessly. Seo-woon tells them he finds it insulting that they honestly believed they could restrain someone like him. He asks whether he really looks like a beginner to them. Then, without warning, shadow clones appear all around the trio. The men are instantly shocked. Everything they heard suggested that Seo-woon was a solo player, yet suddenly he appears to have allies surrounding them. Seo-woon uses the opportunity to make one final warning. He tells them never to involve themselves with him again, and promises that as long as they leave him alone, alone, he will do the same. Before walking away, he advises them to properly judge an opponent's strength next time. After Seo-woon leaves, one of the hunters asks whether they should continue tracking him. The leader immediately rejects the idea, saying provoking someone like Seo-woon would be incredibly stupid. Meanwhile, Hammett questions why Seo-woon did not simply kill them to eliminate future problems. Seo-woon reminds him that this is the real world, not the game, and murder is still a serious crime. After returning home, Seo-woon begins wondering whether it is finally time to move somewhere else. What bothers him most is not the confrontation itself, but how those hunters managed to find him in the first place. His best guess is that selling escrow's necklace at the pawn shop left a trail. Regardless, he decides that if they ever come after him again, he will make sure they understand exactly who they are dealing with. His meeting with Ren also leaves him with an important realization. Compared to most players, especially someone who has only completed 2 runs, he is ridiculously powerful. In fact, the amount of coins he has earned already exceeds what many veterans gain after 20 or even 30 runs. Determined not to waste that advantage, Seo-woon promises himself that he will use every coin wisely and continue growing stronger. As he thinks about everything that has happened, he comes to the conclusion that Cloyd, survival, and reality are not all that different. Both worlds reward strength and punish weakness. That night, Seo-woon spends hours meditating and cultivating. By the time he stops, the sun is already rising. Unfortunately, despite all his effort, he has gathered only a tiny amount of inner energy. The result convinces him that training in the real world is painfully inefficient. Because of this, he starts considering the method Ren suggested during their meeting. Ren had pointed out that while they knew almost nothing about each other, they could build trust through training together. He explained that players could improve their in-game abilities through practice, but doing so in public was impossible. That is why many fixed teams rent private islands and isolated properties for training. Ren believed that training together would allow them to strengthen both their skills and their trust at the same time. Although he admitted that Seo-woon had completely overwhelmed him during the game, he insisted that he was still a capable player and could be useful. Remembering that conversation, Seo-woon realizes he needs Ren's knowledge more than ever. Since Ren is the only person he knows who truly understands the game, he decides to contact him. Calling him up, Seo-woon immediately mentions the government hunters who approached him the previous night. Ren is surprised because it is only Seo-woon's second run, yet people are already targeting him. Seo-woon asks whether that is not normal. Ren quickly tells him that it definitely is not, and asks if Seo-woon has done anything unusual recently. Seo-woon admits that he sold escrow's necklace through a pawn shop. Ren agrees that it is an easy way to get money, but then casually reveals that he melts down the necklaces before selling the gold. Seo-woon is stunned by the idea, and realizes Ren has far more experience with these matters than he expected. Ren explains that staying hidden requires tricks like that, along with proxy accounts and careful planning. He casually mentions that before entering Cloyd Survival, he was actually a well-known hacker on the dark web. Hearing that completely changes the way Seo-woon views him. It becomes obvious that Ren is far more dangerous than his cheerful personality suggests. Seo-woon then asks when they can begin training. Ren proposes starting the very next day. True to his word, Seo-woon arrives at the designated meeting point the following morning. Ren soon shows up on his motorcycle and tells Seo-woon to get on because they need to stop by a supermarket for supplies before heading to the training ground. Curious, Seo-woon asks where exactly this training ground is located. Ren explains that it is about an hour away. When Seo-woon asks for more details, Ren casually reveals that he purchased a small mountain in the suburbs and built the training facility there himself. The revelation leaves Seo-woon speechless. He immediately asks just how rich Ren actually is. Ren responds as if the question itself is strange, and asks whether Seo-woon really considers him rich. That casual response irritates Seo-woon more than he would like to admit. As he sits behind Ren on the motorcycle, holding onto the waist of a high school student, he silently vows that during his next run, he will bring back enough valuables to stop looking so pitiful by comparison. About an hour later, Ren and Seo-woon arrive at the mountain. However, a large fence surrounds the entire property, forcing them to continue the rest of the journey on foot. Seo-woon is still struggling to process the fact that Ren managed to buy an entire mountain and even fence it off. He comments on how convenient life must be when someone has that much money. Ren quickly corrects him, explaining that Seo-woon has the wrong impression. He is not rich because of family wealth, but because he approaches Cloyd Survival as a profit-focused player. According to Ren, every asset he owns came from items he brought back from the game. As they run toward the training facility, Seo-woon asks whether none of it was purchased with his parents' money. Ren reveals that the story is complicated, but he explains that he knew about Cloyd Survival long before he was invited, thanks to his activities on the deep web. Because of that prior knowledge, he always prioritized bringing back items that had real-world value instead of focusing entirely on combat rewards. Curious, Seo-woon asks how much wealth Ren has accumulated after 13 runs. Ren casually lists off 2 houses, the mountain they are standing on, several other pieces of land, stock investments, and around 80 million yen in cash savings. Hearing those numbers completely breaks Seo-woon's brain. He becomes so shocked that he loses his footing and falls face first into the ground while trying to process it all. Once they reach the training grounds, Seo-woon notices a large crystal standing in the center of the facility. Naturally, he assumes Ren brought it back from the game. Ren shakes his head and explains that it is a barrier stone. Once activated, it hides everything within its range from anyone outside. Seo-woon immediately wonders why Ren never used such an incredible item inside the game. Ren reveals that it was actually created in the real world by an alchemist using materials obtained from Cloyd survival. Since real-world items cannot normally be brought into the game, it is useless there. This surprises Seo-woon, who learns that transporting real-world equipment into Cloyd survival is nearly impossible. Ren explains that only an advanced subspace ring found in fixed-player games can bypass that restriction. Hearing this, Seo-woon assumes such a valuable item can only be obtained after becoming a fixed player. After discussing the crystal, Seo-woon suggests they eat first because he is hungry. Ren immediately refuses and proposes a match instead. Pulling out his staff, Ren explains that ever since losing to Seo-woon, he has been training obsessively. Before they begin training together, he wants to properly measure each other's current strength. Seo-woon is surprised that Ren genuinely wants to fight him again. Ren warns him not to hold back, because doing so would only be insulting. Meanwhile, Hamid asks if he should transform into a weapon, but Seo-woon tells him to stay out of it and simply watch. Ren makes the first move by unleashing a powerful lightning strike. Seo-woon dodges by leaping high into the air and immediately closes the distance, hoping to end the fight with a single attack. However, Ren reacts instantly and erects a barrier. For the first time in a while, Seo-woon finds his strike partially stopped. He admits that it is one of the toughest barriers he has ever encountered. Ren proudly explains that barrier durability scales directly with magical power, meaning it is not something that can be broken easily. Jumping backward, Seo-woon admits that Ren has improved dramatically. He confesses that he used to think mages who only spammed spells were weak, but Ren is beginning to change his opinion. Seo-woon summons several shadow clones and sends them charging forward. Ren calmly fries every single one with lightning magic. Taking advantage of the distraction, Seo-woon rushes in and reminds Ren that he is not the only one capable of using magic. He unleashes Iceland magic, forcing Ren to create a wall of flames while arrogantly declaring that such low-level spells will never kill him. Seo-woon suddenly appears through the flames and launches a flurry of punches, but Ren skillfully evades them. Impressed, Seo-woon admits that Ren is unusually capable for a mage. Then, without warning, his legs are trapped by an ice restraint. Ren reveals that it is an Earthbinder spell and boasts that unlike ordinary mages, he has mastered a wide variety of magic. Convinced he has won, Ren begins preparing an enormous lightning attack to finish Seo-woon. Unfortunately for him, a light punch suddenly lands on his back. Spinning around in disbelief, Ren finds Seo-woon standing behind him with a smile. Completely stunned, he demands to know when Seo-woon got there. Seo-woon casually reveals that the person Ren trapped was only a clone. Ren is speechless because he never sensed anything unusual. Seo-woon explains that he has recently been practicing hiding his presence. When he asks for Ren's opinion, Ren honestly admits that the concealment is so effective that he would never notice it in an actual battle. Seo-woon uses the opportunity to tease him, saying that it only proves Ren still has not mastered inner energy properly. When Ren asks whether he was holding back during the fight, Seo-woon openly confirms it. With a sigh, Ren accepts that he currently has no chance of defeating Seo-woon alone. At the same time, Seo-woon compliments Ren for how much stronger his magic has become. Curious, he asks whether Ren used a high circle stone. Ren reveals that his strength comes from the staff he crafted using materials from the previous game. The weapon amplifies magical power by 90%, strengthens spells, and can even store up to 5 spells at once. Seo-woon is completely blown away by the idea that someone can create such a ridiculous item from game materials. As the conversation continues, Ren explains that while the staff is incredibly powerful, he still cannot bring it into the game until he becomes a fixed player. Seo-woon is overwhelmed because he has never encountered anything comparable during his own runs. He estimates that an item like that would easily be worth around 200 coins. Ren quickly corrects him and explains that coin value does not always match market value. Many items in Cloyd survival are surprisingly cheap despite being extremely useful in reality. That difference is exactly how players like him make so much money with relatively few coins. Ren also reveals that many retired players who can no longer enter Cloyd survival become alchemists and focus entirely on crafting. According to him, some of them enjoy that lifestyle even more because they get to earn enormous amounts of money without risking their lives in the game. Seo-woon simply concludes that everyone values different things. Finally deciding that enough fighting has been done for one day, he insists that they eat. Before heading out, Ren casually asks how many coins Seo-woon has earned so far. When Seo-woon says the total is somewhere below 500 coins, Ren nearly faints from shock. He immediately declares that Seo-woon is actually far richer than he is. Seo-woon explains that most of those coins were spent on elixirs and upgrades, so they are already gone. Ren looks horrified and asks if he really dumped hundreds of coins into stat growth without thinking twice. From Ren's perspective, 500 coins could have been turned into a fortune. Sia-woon immediately fires back by saying Ren is still relatively weak, because he spends too much time thinking about money instead of strength. After a brief pause, Ren reluctantly admits that Sia-woon might have a point. Meanwhile, elsewhere, the private organization that previously targeted Sia-woon submits its report to its leader, a massive and intimidating man named Tatsuya. After reviewing everything his subordinates have gathered, Tatsuya concludes that Sia-woon is someone worth monitoring closely. Although they still have no idea who he really is or where he lives, they do know one important detail: he once sold Escrow's necklace at a pawn shop, making him a person of significant interest moving forward. Back at the mountain training grounds, Sia-woon throws himself completely into training. His main focus is improving his shadow clone technique. He pushes his body and inner energy to the limit, and eventually discovers that his maximum number of clones is 7. Every attempt to create an 8th clone fails, proving that 7 is currently the absolute limit of his abilities. While Sia-woon focuses on martial training, Ren is busy with his own practice. Powerful spells explode across the training area one after another as Ren repeatedly casts advanced magic. Sia-woon is honestly shocked because Ren is throwing around high-level spells as casually as most people would cast beginner magic. Even after all that, Ren still believes he can push himself further. Eventually, Sia-woon calls for a break and tells him to stop training for a while because he is starving. A few minutes later, Sia-woon has prepared a large pot of ramen for the two of them. Looking at the food, he cannot help but laugh at how he somehow ended up handling cooking duties from the very first day. While eating, he notices that Ren has been talking on the phone for quite some time and naturally assumes it must be his girlfriend. Ren immediately corrects him and reveals that he is actually talking to his younger sister. Even then, Sia-woon uses the opportunity to tease him, saying that life must be nice when someone is rich enough to keep their family happy. Ren's expression changes slightly as he explains that he and his sister are close because they are the only family each other has left. The moment Sia-woon hears that, he freezes. Ren calmly explains that both of their parents died when he was still in middle school. Feeling guilty, Sia-woon asks why he never mentioned something so important before. Ren shrugs and says it is not exactly a pleasant story to tell. He also admits that he never really cared about being mistaken for a spoiled rich kid. Ren eventually opens up about what happened. His parents were killed in a drunk driving accident 4 years ago. After their deaths, relatives who had barely visited them suddenly appeared at the funeral and acted as though they were in charge of everything. Later, Ren discovered that the condolence money had been divided among those same relatives. One memory still haunts him more than anything else. His younger sister once asked him to help tell their aunt and uncle about something that had happened at school, but overwhelmed by grief and stress, Ren shouted at her and told her to do it herself. Even years later, he still hates himself for reacting that way. At the time, he was struggling with much more than the loss of his parents. He was also being bullied at school and came home beaten almost every day. On top of that, he suddenly felt responsible for supporting his sister and holding their broken family together. Eventually, the pressure became too much. Ren isolated himself in his room and spent most of his time exploring the deep web. During that period, he discovered that he had a natural talent for hacking. It was also through those activities that he first learned about Cloyd survival. At first, he thought the stories were nonsense, but the deeper he researched, the more fascinated he became. Before long, he found himself wishing for an invitation, believing that the game might completely change his life. Unfortunately, the invitation never came. Meanwhile, things continued getting worse. When the lease on their family apartment expired, Ren and his sister were forced to move from a spacious 3-bedroom apartment into a cramped semi-basement home in the suburbs. Their uncle claimed the move was necessary because of financial difficulties, but Ren later learned that the man had embezzled the deposit money from their original home. That was the moment Ren realized that it was just him and his sister against the world. The situation eventually pushed him to his breaking point. One day, Ren ran into the streets and screamed at the sky, demanding to know why he and his sister had to suffer so much. Crying and convinced that the world had abandoned them, he vented all of his anger and despair. In the middle of that emotional breakdown, he received his very first invitation to Cloyd survival. That happened 2 years ago. Listening to the story, Sia-woon asks whether Ren ever got revenge on the bullies who tormented him. Ren shakes his head and explains that they all ended up attending different high schools. More importantly, he never wanted to risk getting arrested because he was the only person capable of taking care of his sister. Ren admits that moving away ultimately improved his life. Deep down, Sia-woon knows that things did not get better simply because Ren changed locations. They improved because Ren changed himself. Curious about another matter, Sia-woon asks whether it is really okay for Ren to leave his sister alone for an entire month while training. Ren reassures him that she is currently staying with their aunt, who has basically become a mother figure to them. Since she is on an extended break, she has been helping out at the family's orchard and keeping an eye on Ren's sister. After hearing the entire story, Sia-woon quietly suggests that they stop dwelling on the past and return to training. Several weeks later, the story shifts to the National Security Department. Inside the administration office, Manager Naruse is furiously scolding several junior operatives. She is enraged because they have been targeting ability users without proper authorization. According to Naruse, Actions like that only push ability users closer to joining anti-government groups. One of the field operatives tries defending himself by claiming they were simply following orders from higher-ups. The excuse only makes Naruse angrier. She slams her fist onto the table and demands to know why important reports were withheld from her. The operative attempts to explain that the report was merely delayed, but before he can finish, Naruse smashes the table so hard that it nearly breaks. Terrified, the man falls backward onto the floor. Naruto slowly approaches him and coldly asks whether he is trying to imply that she is an idiot. The other operatives quickly realize what is really happening. The department head has been bypassing Naruto entirely and secretly using a private organization to deal with ability users. That betrayal is the real reason she is furious. Naruse should technically be one of the highest-ranking officials in the department, but after becoming an ability user herself, she was demoted and forced to work alongside lower-ranking personnel. Furious and disgusted, she storms out of the office and announces that a disciplinary hearing will be held. She also informs the lead operative, Yoshita, that he is suspended from all duties until a final decision is made. Later, after returning to her office, Naruse reflects on everything that has happened. She becomes convinced that upper management has placed spies around her to monitor her every move. The entire situation feels like a ridiculous farce designed to isolate her. As an ability user, she has become an outcast within her own organization, and no matter how reasonable her opinions are, her superiors refuse to take them seriously anymore. By the 23rd day of their training camp, Seowon and Ren had become completely accustomed to training together. Their teamwork and understanding of each other's abilities had improved dramatically. Even Seowon admitted that Ren had grown much stronger over the past few weeks. Despite that progress, Ren still couldn't defeat Seowon no matter how hard he tried. Seowon pointed out that Ren had improved enough to fight effectively, even without relying on his special staff. At the same time, Seowon himself had also advanced considerably, reaching the point where he could now create 8 shadow clones instead of 7. Feeling satisfied with their progress, Seowon suggested that they eat before finally leaving the mountain. Ren couldn't help asking whether Seowon actually ate ramen every single day. Seowon replied that after surviving on jerky in the game, ramen felt like heaven. Ren admitted that it was definitely better than dried meat, and Seowon enthusiastically agreed, insisting that adding eggs turned it into a complete meal. He even joked about how strange it was that he had managed to build muscle while eating so much ramen. Ren then revealed an interesting piece of information. According to research conducted by some players, people who cultivate inner energy develop muscle far more easily than ordinary people and experience significant improvements in physical abilities. Seowon was shocked to hear that people had already begun researching such things. As they talked, Seowon pointed out that returning home meant the start of a new school semester. Ren sighed and said that he had a mountain of work waiting for him because he had left his company unattended during the training camp. Seowon nearly choked when he heard that a high school student was running a company. Ren casually explained that it was a small online business. Since players couldn't openly convert valuable game items into large amounts of money, many of them created shell companies to disguise their income. Most of those businesses technically operated at a loss, but the profits from Cloyd survival easily covered everything. Ren advised Seowon to remember that method if he ever struggled with handling large sums of money. The more Seowon listened, the more impressed he became with how clever Ren was. Just when Seowon thought Ren couldn't surprise him anymore, Ren casually mentioned that he had already arranged a new place for him to live and had even moved his belongings there. Seowon was completely stunned. He immediately asked why Ren would do something so huge without even consulting him first, especially since it must have cost a fortune. Ren explained that the neighborhood wasn't perfect, but the apartment itself was a spacious 3-bedroom unit with a deposit worth 20 million yen. According to Ren, protecting Seowon's identity was important because they already had too many people interested in tracking them down. Seowon couldn't understand why Ren trusted him enough to spend such a massive amount of money on his behalf. Ren simply told him to consider it a loan that could be repaid later. That only made Seowon panic more because 20 million wasn't exactly pocket change. Ren calmly replied that Seowon would probably earn the money back during his next game anyway. After finishing their meal, they packed up their things and officially ended the 3-week training camp. Looking back, Seowon couldn't help realizing how much his life had changed since entering Cloyd survival. Not long ago, he had been living in a cramped 1-room apartment, but now he was moving into a spacious 3-bedroom home. When he finally arrived, he was amazed by how large it was. Ren pointed out that it only seemed bigger because it was still empty. Seowon admitted that he liked it a lot and that it felt even larger than the home where he grew up. Before leaving, Ren promised to buy him one appliance as a housewarming gift. Seowon was speechless. Ren had already saddled him with a 20 million yen debt and was still offering presents. Nonetheless, he sincerely thanked him for everything and encouraged him to go spend time with his sister. Once Ren finally left, Hammett emerged from storage and immediately started complaining about being sealed away for an entire month. Seowon explained that he needed uninterrupted training time, while Hammett expressed disbelief at how much Seowon's living conditions had improved in such a short period. Sitting down in his new apartment, Seo-woon began sorting through items he could potentially sell to furnish the place. While organizing his belongings, Seo-woon suddenly sensed something unusual. Looking out the window, he spotted an apartment building across the street, engulfed in flames. His first thought was that a player had to be responsible because the situation felt unnatural. He had barely moved into the neighborhood and already someone was causing chaos nearby. Before he could investigate further, someone knocked on his door. The sound immediately put him on edge because Ren was supposed to be the only person who knew his new address. He cautiously approached the entrance and opened the door to find police officers standing outside. One of them explained that residents were being evacuated because of the massive fire in the building across the street. With little choice, Seo-woon followed their instructions and joined the other residents gathering outside. As he watched, the flames only grew larger and more intense. However, his attention soon shifted elsewhere. Using his senses, he detected 8 separate presences moving nearby. It felt as though all 8 individuals were pursuing the same target. Realizing something much bigger was happening behind the scenes, Seo-woon decided he needed to find out exactly who they were hunting. Meanwhile, a female ability user was desperately fighting against a group of men. From what Seo-woon could tell while observing from a distance with the cloak of hiding, she was a mage and already completely exhausted. The woman shouted at her attackers, telling them to back off because she had simply been living quietly, and they were the ones who started the fight. Unfortunately, the men ignored her warning and rushed her all at once. Even she realized there was no way she could hold them off much longer. Just as they were about to overwhelm her, ice vines suddenly burst from the ground and wrapped around several of the attackers. The spell had come from Seo-woon. Even he was surprised, realizing that the Ice Lance spell could apparently be used as a restraining technique. The men immediately turned around and spotted him. They demanded to know who he was, but Seo-woon calmly replied that they didn't need to know. The attackers instantly assumed he was the woman's ally. Seo-woon criticized their methods, saying it was pathetic to gang up on a single exhausted woman. Panic spread through the group as they realized they were being ambushed. They tried organizing a counterattack, but Seo-woon was already moving through them, knocking people down before they could react. While he was dismantling the group, the woman asked what organization he belonged to. Seo-woon gave her the same answer he gave everyone else she didn't need to know. The attackers then drew weapons and charged both of them, hoping to subdue them together. Instead of escaping through the opening Seo-woon had created, the woman chose to stay and fight. That decision annoyed Seo-woon. After everything he had done to create a path for her escape, she simply stood there and rejoined the battle. He bluntly told her that her situational awareness was terrible, regardless of how many runs she had completed. The woman responded by unleashing a powerful fire spell that forced the attackers backward. However, they quickly regrouped and claimed that she shouldn't underestimate Stockpile, boasting that they had already dealt with players far stronger than her. Before they could regain momentum, Seo-woon appeared behind the swordsman and hit him so hard that his skull nearly caved in. The woman could only stare in shock, wondering who this mysterious fighter really was. Before she could ask any more questions, Seo-woon grabbed her and dragged her away from the battlefield. He moved so quickly that the attackers couldn't even react before the pair vanished. Once he was sure nobody was following them, he tossed the woman onto a rooftop. She immediately began complaining because he had carried her like a grocery bag the entire way. Seo-woon rolled his eyes and told her she was far too noisy. The woman argued that being carried around like luggage was rude, and that she nearly threw up during the trip. She then started questioning him again, asking if he belonged to another resistance group because she had never seen him before. Seo-woon denied it. She asked whether he was part of a government agency or a private organization. Once again, he said no. The woman refused to accept that answer because he had just fought the people chasing her. She continued pressing him, convinced he must belong to some unknown faction. Seo-woon finally told her that he was simply an ordinary passerby. When she still wouldn't stop asking questions, he told her to consider herself lucky, stay hidden, and avoid getting caught again because he wasn't planning on saving her a second time. With that, he immediately left. While returning home, Seo-woon couldn't help wondering why he had gotten involved in the first place. He knew he disliked the methods used by the government-backed groups, but risking himself for a stranger wasn't exactly his style. He couldn't tell whether it was a sense of kinship toward another player, or whether he had subconsciously decided to play the hero. Back at his apartment, Hammett pointed out that helping someone so selflessly was unusual for him. Seo-woon simply replied that he couldn't stand the men in suits. Not long after, Ren called him. He had seen reports of the explosion nearby and wanted to know if Seo-woon was okay. Seo-woon assured him that he was fine and explained what had happened with the mysterious woman. The moment Ren learned that Seo-woon had gotten involved, he nearly lost his mind. He demanded to know what Seo-woon had been thinking. Seo-woon, meanwhile, was too busy tearing up tissues on the floor to make a makeshift sleeping area because he still didn't have a bed. He explained that he originally intended to just watch, but stepped in when he saw several men attacking one woman. Ren couldn't believe he was hearing this from the same guy who casually shot arrows through people's heads during Cloyd's survival. Seo-woon argued that reality and the game were completely different. Ren then asked if anyone had seen his face. Thankfully, Seo-woon explained that he had been wearing the cloak of hiding. Ren warned him that dealing with private organizations was one thing, but drawing the attention of government agencies could become a serious problem. Seo-woon agreed and admitted that he had no intention of losing the expensive new apartment Ren had gotten for him. After ending the call, he decided to sleep and planned to buy an electric blanket the following day. The next day, Naruse visited the military hospital where the operatives beaten by Seo-woon were recovering. The moment she entered the room, the injured agents visibly panicked. Naruse immediately demanded an explanation and asked what had happened. The team leader explained that they had been ambushed during an operation. Naruse exploded with anger, demanding to know why she hadn't been informed, despite being the department manager. She wanted to know who had authorized the mission in the first place. Before anyone could answer properly, the general manager entered and revealed that he had approved it. Naruse instantly challenged him, asking what authority he had to authorize field operations without consulting her. The man casually claimed that the intelligence arrived late and immediate action had been necessary. Naruse demanded to know who would take responsibility for the failure. The general manager assured her that the issue had already been handled and that upper management was satisfied with the explanation. He continued talking as though failures were simply part of the job and advised Naruse to get used to how field operations worked. After delivering his irritating lecture, he turned to the injured operatives and encouraged them to recover quickly so they could continue supporting Naruse. Once he finally finished speaking, he left with her. Before departing, Naruse instructed the team leader to submit a full report once he was discharged. Several days later, Seo-woon met Ren again. Ren immediately asked whether anything had changed since the incident involving the woman. Seo-woon jokingly asked if Ren had come to lecture him again. Ren replied that he was genuinely worried because Seo-woon had a habit of doing reckless things. While Ren continued talking, Seo-woon found himself distracted by Ren's stylish necklace and started thinking about getting one himself. He then explained that after the incident, he had visited a convenience store and noticed government agents everywhere. Fortunately, they still hadn't discovered his identity. From what he could tell, they were searching for the woman he rescued rather than him. Seo-woon even argued that remaining in the area was safer because hiding in plain sight was often the best strategy. Curious about something else, he asked Ren what stockpile actually meant since the operatives had called themselves that. Ren explained that stockpile referred to ordinary people who gained abilities through special items rather than through participation in Cloyd survival. Since they couldn't level up through the system, their growth was slower and less efficient, but they were still far stronger than normal humans. Their conversation was interrupted when Seo-woon's phone suddenly rang. Without checking the caller ID, he answered and was immediately greeted by someone shouting at him. It turned out to be his friend, Junpei. Junpei reminded him that Naoki's birthday was the next day, and that a venue had already been rented for the celebration. He wanted Seo-woon to come along. Hearing this, Seo-woon suddenly realized how disconnected he had become from his normal life. Ever since entering Cloyd survival, almost all of his attention had been focused on training, surviving, and growing stronger. He admitted that he had completely forgotten about the birthday. Junpei confessed that he originally planned to call the following day, but knew that would be a disaster. He then demanded Seo-woon's address so he could pick him up. Seo-woon asked whether attending was really mandatory. Junpei admitted that Naoki could be annoying, but that didn't mean they should skip celebrating his birthday. As Seo-woon continued arguing, Junpei casually dropped a name that immediately changed everything. Mina would also be attending. The moment he heard that, old memories resurfaced. During his first year of high school, Mina had been part of the same friend group. Over time, Seo-woon had fallen for her completely. He liked her from the very first moment he saw her, and even begged his friends to help him spend more time around her. He carried those feelings for an entire year before finally gathering the courage to confess. Unfortunately, everything collapsed afterward. Following that failed confession, Seo-woon barely saw Mina again throughout their entire second year of high school. After finishing his call with Shohei, Seo-woon noticed Ren staring at him with an amused expression. Ren immediately asked whether Mina had been his first love. Disgusted, Seo-woon accused him of secretly listening to his conversation using some kind of magic. Ren quickly defended himself, explaining that the phone speaker had simply been loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. Seo-woon clarified that Mina wasn't exactly his first love, but rather a one-sided crush that ended in rejection. Upon hearing that, Ren confidently declared that he knew a confession method with a 100% success rate. Curious, despite himself, Seo-woon asked him to explain. Ren claimed that the key was to never give a girl time to think too much about the situation. According to him, the confession had to come completely out of nowhere. After surprising her, all Seo-woon needed to do was look directly into her eyes, tell her he liked her, and ask her out. Seo-woon stared at him in disbelief. The advice sounded ridiculously simple. Ren insisted that it worked perfectly, and proudly claimed it was the method behind all of his past relationships. Seo-woon immediately dismissed every word of it, arguing that someone like Ren clearly lived a very different life from him. Eventually, Seo-woon headed home, while Ren continued teasing him and wishing him luck with his future confession. The next morning, Shohei arrived much earlier than expected to pick him up. The moment he stepped inside, he was shocked. Not only did Seo-woon seem far more confident than before, but the apartment itself was enormous. When questioned, Seo-woon lied and claimed that he was simply renting a room from someone he knew at school. He was equally surprised to see that Shohei now owned a car. Shohei explained that he had saved up money and taken out a small loan to purchase it. Seo-woon couldn't help praising him, pointing out that very few people their age could buy a car using their own earnings. Unlike many of their old classmates, Shohei had gone straight into the workforce after high school. The beginning had been rough, but he now held a stable position at a small to medium-sized company. During the drive, Seo-woon asked where Naoki had booked the birthday celebration. Shohei revealed that it was a high-end yakiniku restaurant. He then asked whether Seo-woon had prepared a gift. Seo-woon admitted he was probably just going to give Naoki a gift card. Shortly afterward, they arrived at the restaurant, and Seo-woon was stunned by how expensive everything looked. When he asked whether Naoki was really paying for all of this, Shohei laughed and said Naoki simply wanted another chance to show off his wealth. As soon as they entered, several old classmates recognized them and greeted them with the nickname Shame Brothers, a joke created by combining parts of their names. The group immediately bombarded Seo-woon with questions. Someone asked if he had really completed military service, while another wanted to know where all of his new muscle came from. Seo-woon casually brushed it off, claiming it was the result of light exercise. The atmosphere remained cheerful until Naoki and Mina finally arrived. Naoki greeted Seo-woon in his usual cold manner, and Seo-woon responded politely enough. However, his attention drifted toward Mina instead. Naoki quickly noticed that Seo-woon seemed far more interested in looking elsewhere than talking to him. Trying to smooth things over, Seo-woon mentioned that he had already sent a gift card as a birthday present. Naoki responded by tapping him on the shoulder and saying he didn't need the gift. Instead, he told Seo-woon to sit down and enjoy the party. As the evening progressed, the room became louder. The alcohol started flowing, and everyone gradually became more relaxed. Watching everything unfold, Seo-woon realized how deeply he had immersed himself in Cloyd survival. He had almost forgotten what ordinary life felt like. At the same time, he knew Naoki's invitations were never entirely innocent. Naoki enjoyed showing off the advantages his wealthy family had given him, and many of the people present seemed to gain satisfaction by comparing themselves to someone like Seo-woon. Eventually, Naoki stepped outside to take a call. During his absence, someone asked why Mina and Naoki had arrived together. Another person explained that Naoki had been pursuing Mina for quite some time. Since Mina worked at a company owned by Naoki's father, some people suspected that their growing closeness was connected to that fact, though others doubted it. Shohei then nudged Seo-woon and jokingly asked if the real reason he attended was to see Mina. Seo-woon denied it and insisted that everything was in the past. Instead, he focused on complimenting the quality of the food. Unfortunately, that was exactly when Naoki returned. Naoki smugly remarked that the meal was probably far too expensive for Seo-woon to afford. He sat down beside him and asked whether something was bothering him. Seo-woon calmly replied that nothing was wrong, and that he was simply happy to see familiar faces again. Naoki responded by telling him to cheer up because he was ruining the atmosphere. As the conversation continued, Naoki's attitude became increasingly irritating. He repeatedly implied that Seo-woon's life was difficult because he lacked money and status. Pretending to be helpful, he offered to solve Seo-woon's problems whenever he needed assistance. Seo-woon played along, admitting that having a rich friend could certainly be useful and joking that he might contact him someday. Rather than taking the hint, Naoki continued talking down to him. Even when Seo-woon poured him a drink, Naoki mocked him, saying he poured alcohol exactly like a waiter would. He went on to praise Seo-woon for supposedly knowing his place and not stepping out of line. After listening to enough of the nonsense, Seo-woon finally slammed his cup onto the table and suggested that Naoki had probably drunk too much and should slow down. The room instantly became tense. Naoki's face twisted with anger while the others hurried to calm him down. Instead of backing off, Seo-woon asked whether Naoki actually had a problem with him. Naoki proudly declared that he had nothing against Seo-woon personally, but someone living the life of a loser should learn to act like one. Even Hammett, who had been quietly observing everything, became furious and immediately asked for permission to deal with him. Seo-woon ignored the suggestion and simply stared at Naoki. Rather than criticizing Naoki's behavior, several people in the room started blaming Seo-woon for escalating the situation. They held Naoki back while demanding that Seo-woon apologize. Instead, Seo-woon stood up and announced that he was leaving. He blamed himself for even attending in the first place and told everyone they could continue enjoying the party without him. Before walking out, he looked at Naoki and called him pathetic, saying his desperate need to flaunt his money was embarrassing. The comment only made Naoki even angrier. As Seo-woon walked through the streets afterward, he found himself surprisingly unaffected by what had happened. In all likelihood, he would never see most of those people again. Rather than dwelling on the party, his thoughts drifted back toward the next game and the opportunities it would bring. Elsewhere, Tatsuya and his organization finally received a breakthrough report. Their investigators had successfully traced Seo-woon's location. The moment Tatsuya heard the news, he immediately stood up from his seat and ordered his men to prepare. Their person of interest had finally been found, and they were ready to make their move against Sia Woon.